The Ghost Specialist. By Incarnated Wisp. Genre: fan fiction. Completed. Strategy. Action. Adventure. Synopsis. Samuel Greyson wants to be a ghost-type specialist, except that's a little hard to do when living on the small Dewford Island. His mother doesn't want him to leave on his Pokémon Journey, and there are no ghost types nearby that he could easily catch. His ticket out comes from a discovery made while preparing for an impromptu challenge. Armed with impossible knowledge, Sam aims to head out into the world and take his dreams into his own hands. The Ghost Specialist mixes the world of the Pokémon anime and games to create a more grounded setting, one perfect for a classic, journey-based Pokémon fan fiction. While a more grounded setting warrants more realistic concerns, nothing about it takes away from the inherent cheerfulness that makes Pokémon uniquely Pokémon. This fiction might contain serious moments, but it is not dark. The Ghost Specialist is simply meant to be enjoyable. Expect to see a journey across Johto and Kanto, a world set just before Ash Ketchum's own start, and how modern information, Generation 9+, can be used in a setting with much more limited knowledge. Other than that, you can also expect a weak to strong protagonist. Late Gen evolutions present in an early Gen world. A character that earns his successes. Friends made along the way. No growth is immediately handed to Sam. Any development, he needs to work for. The premise of this fiction involves advanced knowledge, but that is still just that, knowledge. For Sam to grow as a trainer, he must figure out how to apply what he learns. Chapter 1. The creak of the crystal chandelier came so suddenly that Sam almost jumped out of his skin. He froze, stock still, the teenage boy now resembling some kind of dark jacket-wearing statue. Slowly, he panned his flashlight around the dusty entry hall but saw nothing more than the aged building around him. "There's definitely something here," he said. "This mansion's been abandoned for years. I can't see the chandelier moving like that unless something causes it." A gulp was pushed down his throat as he took another step forward. His sneaker squeaked against the flower-patterned floor that was somehow still intact despite the lack of care. For all he strained his ears, Samuel was unable to piece together anything else going on. Well, save for a bit of sniffing at his side. A blue, shrew-like creature flicked her head around while remaining on a fear-ridden, high alert. "Hey Cyndaquil, I know we're hunting for ghost types, but I think we should make some kind of plan," Sam said. "We haven't really practiced battling, but I know you know smokescreen. A cloud like that might be a good way to escape." A short squeak came to acknowledge him. Cyndaquil pushed closer to Sam's body. She was only a foot and a half tall when crouched on all four legs, but as his closest friend and only member of his eventual Pokémon team, Sam trusted her with all his heart. He'd be relying on her for his purpose here. After all, he had come here for a reason. A life-changing goal. This wasn't just a teenage boy's wild excursion, this was something he could use to prove himself. "Mom won't let me take on the gym challenge, and I don't want to wait another 4 years until I'm 18. If I want to become a proper ghost-type specialist, what better way to prove that I'm capable than to catch one all on my own?" All children dreamed of becoming a Pokémon trainer, but they usually grew out of it. More realistic expectations would settle in, and while most would end up taking on a gym or two, the vast majority never caught more than a single Pokémon. Sam, however, had a dream he had stuck with for as long as he could remember. He was going to become the very best ghost-type specialist in the world. He just had to prove to his mother that he could do it, first. This building was an abandoned mansion, though it wasn't as large as a true mansion, and it had fallen into disrepair from years of neglect. Outside, windows hung slack on their hinges, and the building's exterior was covered with wood rot. The abandoned home was tall enough to loom over him when he had first approached, yet almost as if inviting him in, the iron gate that sealed off the property had been unlocked. Inside, however, the place was still mostly intact. Opulent wood carvings decorated the walls, and its tile floor had only the faintest coating of dust. It lacked furniture, though, with the entry hall consisting of only a single staircase. Nearby openings led to a similarly empty dining room and a carpeted study that lacked any books or even a chair. "I heard Mom talking to a customer about this place. Some kids heard crying coming from here when exploring. Considering it's been abandoned for years, the cry has to have been from some kind of wild Pokémon. Based on what I know, I bet it was from either a Duskull or a Shuppet." Sam didn't move forward, choosing to remain in place. His lack of confidence got the best of him as he remained just past the paired, front doors. Despite his flashlight providing light, it was mostly only a beam. Occasionally, the tiles reflected it back at him, but it otherwise only revealed small sections at a time. Shuppet are pure ghost types, relatively frail, and tend to rely on physical or dark type moves, he continued, mostly speaking just to provide some life to the area around him. They feed off of negative emotions, so maybe one won't be in an empty place like this. Duskull, however, Sam let out a low, nervous chuckle. Duskull are a bit different. They're also pure ghost type, but they're more capable of sustaining a hit. More importantly, they like scaring people. Like by letting loose a spooky cry near some young kids. He gulped again. At his side, Cyndaquil began to shake. Sam had left his realization go unsaid, but the small Pokémon seemed to have put the pieces together anyway. How long can you maintain your fire? He asked with a dry throat. Cyndaquil's back sparked and popped. Briefly, this entry hall was illuminated with flickering flames that created unnatural shadows. Only a second later, all of that faded away. Only a second or two, then. Useful for attacks, but that's it. Sam scoured his mind for any further reason to delay. Did he have anything else to bring up with Cyndaquil? Did he have any other pertinent facts to share? Maybe. Maybe Sam had left something at home? No. The tense moment was interrupted by a sharp noise. Sam slapped his own cheek. We came here for a reason. No point in getting lost in our own fear. We're going to catch a ghost type or die trying. Now, come on, Cyndaquil. Let's go. He marched forward, heading directly up the set of stairs ahead of him. Cyndaquil squeaked in alarm before scurrying forward, doing her best to stay at Sam's side. Sam purposefully kept his expression hardened, his lips pressed tight in a scowl. Sure, his hands might have been shaking, but at least he was no longer stalling just past the front door. Truth be told, Sam wasn't sure how his love for the ghost type had started, but between all the spooky stories and tall tales that had piqued his young mind's interest, he was determined to at least meet one. Nothing ever happened on the island he called home, and he had a feeling this would be his only chance to actually do something about that. Heavy footfalls brought him to the second story, where a moth-eaten rug lay tattered down a long hallway. A row of decaying yet impeccably carved doors stretched out to both of Sam's sides. Opaque, glass windows let in the faintest amount of light from the manor's exterior, but it remained that Sam's flashlight was the only thing that let him see past those few inches at the ends of the halls. Quickly, Sam shined his light to his left, but there was nothing there but more doors. Then, just as fast, Sam shined his light to his right. Quill! Cyndaquil shouted and dashed to hide behind Sam's legs. At the very end of the hall, something small and dark darted into a room. The door it pushed past squeaked and remained partially opened. Duskull, Sam mumbled. His eyes were wide, and Cyndaquil pressed herself against him even harder than before. Like I said, we're here for a reason, alright. Sam hated how shaky his voice was. This time, while walking forward, Sam made sure to keep his footsteps light. He forced his breathing to slow and his movements to come deliberately. Anything to reduce his noise and presence, he did. It was perfectly silent and perfectly motionless around him. Sam could already feel the hairs standing up on the back of his neck. He had no clue just how terrified he looked. He imagined that his black hair might have turned partially white from fear. Though, as far as Sam could tell, that change hadn't happened. That was something that only ever happened in cartoons. The possibility didn't actually exist. Ghosts, though? Ghosts were real. Sam kept that in mind as he slowly inched forward. Once he reached the point where the shadowed thing had disappeared, Sam carefully grabbed the bronze handle of the cracked open door before throwing it the rest of the way open. There, he shouted to mimic some semblance of bravery, and he rapidly moved his light around to search through the room before him. As he did, in his pocket was a weight he was intensely familiar with, a minimized pokeball that had taken $200 of his pitiful savings to purchase. It would serve as the tool to capture whatever ghost type he found. Yet, in this room, the beam of his flashlight illuminated nothing more than a dusty bed, a collapsed wardrobe, and a chair covered with a white cloth. Cyndaquil was screaming, but she remained clutched to Sam's leg. He would have been disappointed, but then the light settled on what was in the room's very center, a clump of old blankets that had been pushed together to form a makeshift nest. There, right in the middle of that clump, was a Pokémon, but it wasn't the Duskull that Sam expected. Instead, it was small, pink, and staring at him with a warbling mouth. Curved, rabbit-like ears stood on their ends out of fear. That Sam had to quickly get a hold of his own emotions before he could properly identify the species. That's a Whismore. It's just a normal type. There wasn't any ghost type here, a Whismore found itself a home. He almost wanted to laugh, but when he saw the Whismore start to shake, he took a step back instead. How about that smokescreen now, Cyndaquil? He asked. She was hanging off of his leg. Instead of using the move, she whimpered. The thing about Whismore was that it might not have been the Pokémon Sam wanted, but it was still a Pokémon capable of using Pokémon moves. In its case, there was a likely reason those kids had heard its cry. The Pokémon was like a living speaker system with how loud of a noise it could make. Sam reflexively tried to cover his ears, failed to do so thanks to the flashlight he held, and then shoved it into his pocket to be able to scoop up Cyndaquil. After that, he began to run. Behind him, an awful screech rang out. Terrified from Sam's chaotic entrance, the Whismore began its ear-piercing cry. The unconscious move it used, uproar, sent out sound waves so deafening and violent that the very supports of this manor began to shake. Run! Leave! Let's get the heck out of here! Despite yelling, Sam couldn't hear the sound of his own voice. He clutched Cyndaquil to his chest and sprinted out the front doors. This manor hadn't been built in town, rather, it was located down a small, stone path inside a section of nearby forest. Sam ignored the overgrown front yard, ignored how the trees cast a spooky dim light around him, ignored how the few wild Pokémon gave him strange looks as he darted past, and he ignored the burning in his legs all the way up until he had properly made his escape. He was panting by the end of it, and Sam collapsed onto the ground. Having emerged out of the forest, he was now at the cliffside that overlooked his home. Dewford Town. A sea of red brick buildings stretched out below him, grouped up around a small dock at the edge of the island. The cliff he sat on wrapped around the town's edge, perfectly framing it while also acting as a limit that would never allow the place to grow any larger. He took a deep breath. I should have known it wouldn't be a ghost type. Nothing interesting ever happens here. He rolled onto his back. Cyndaquil squirmed to free herself from his arms. When she noticed he was resting, she also relaxed, and her head pressed down against his chest. I'm sorry, Cyndaquil. I should have never brought us into that mansion, he said. But I want you to know that I'm going to keep trying. No matter what, I'll eventually get a ghost type, and once I do, Mom will have to let us go on a Pokémon journey. The idea of exploring the world. Encountering new people and Pokémon. Building up a team that would be undefeatable at its peak. Yet. That's the dream. Sam knew why he wanted to have a team of only ghost types. He wanted to do that because it was cool. While resting, Sam breathed out, and the shift of his stomach caused Cyndaquil to unintentionally be pushed off his chest. She squeaked in alarm as she rolled onto her back, and after a moment of flailing, Sam found her having somehow settled into the crook of his arm. I'm never going to abandon you, though, he said. Just because I want to train ghost types doesn't mean you'd be off the team. Even some of the best type specialists out there have one or two exceptions. Besides, there isn't anyone else I'd want to travel with. You'll always be right by my side. She smiled, and Sam smiled back. He had never expected to meet her, as Cyndaquil tended to be a rather rare species. However, Sam had the advantage of having an experienced grandfather, and though the man had passed, he had made sure Sam wouldn't start his eventual journey alone. Sam had met with Cyndaquil young and befriended her quickly. They initially planned to explore the world together years ago, but when his grandfather departed this world, some things had fallen apart. For now, ugh. Sam unconsciously grimaced. Mom's not going to be happy if we get back late. I know we want to rest, but we should probably get going. Cyndaquil groaned out of annoyance and pushed away to return to her feet. Sam did the same, brushing off loose grass from his jeans and jacket as he did. From there, a staircase brought them down the cliffside and into the paved streets of Dewford proper. His home wasn't too far away, so Sam slowly made his way directly there. He arrived at a building labeled bookstore only a few minutes later. Standing outside, he took a deep breath, and then Sam moved within. Chapter 2. Sam felt sore when he entered his home and mother's shop. Most of his free time was spent sitting around and reading, not running and hiking and fleeing and dealing with all of that back at the mansion. Cyndaquil, being a small enough Pokémon, had curled up behind Sam's head within his hood. She didn't perfectly fit, but that meant the fabric was tight against her, creating the perfect nest for her to rest in. But even with all that exhaustion Sam currently faced, walking inside immediately filled him with relief. A chime above the front door of the bookstore rang to signify his arrival, and Sam took in a deep breath, tasting the smell of new books in the air. Shelves lined the floors, and books lined those shelves. Stories of every genre were out for potential customers to browse, and displayed in the front window were spinning racks filled with colorful comic books. "I'll be right there," his mother called out. Sam didn't see her until she left the door just behind the checkout counter, where she smiled upon noticing his face. "Sam. You're back. I was worried I'd need to head out to find you. We just got a delivery in. I've been busy unpacking it all." "I'll help," Sam said immediately, offering his assistance despite his exhaustion. "Oh? You know you don't need to." "Sure, but I want to." Sam shrugged. "Can't a boy want to help out his mom?" Sam's mother shook her head, amused, and she moved back through the doorway while waving for Sam to follow. She looked a lot like him, having similar facial features and the same pure black hair, but she kept her hair longer and tied up in a bun. The main difference between them were actually their eyes. Sam's eyes were a grey that had come from his late father, whereas his mother's eyes were a deep shade of brown. This side room was filled with boxes, just as his mom said. There were a few extra shelves filled with their own books, but those books weren't on sale, they had already been purchased by people waiting who would soon come to pick up their orders. "The ship from Rustboro came in today," his mother said while cutting through mailing tape. "Brought in the usual orders, but we got the shipment, too." "The shipment?" Sam asked. "The shipment," his mother specified. "You know, the one that comes at the start of each year." Sam's eyes widened, and he rushed forward. His mother chuckled as he moved, and he did his best to not blush. He had to admit that the news was making him act like a little kid again. Yet, he couldn't help it. He only got to experience this once a year. Meanwhile, as Sam knelt in front of the very important box, Cyndaquil stretched to wake up and hopped out of his hood. She landed on the ground and trotted over to the corner, where a Pokémon bed was laid out and where a purple Antan cat was napping within. Cyndaquil didn't wait to join his mother's Delcatty in her own restful slumber. As she curled up next to it, the large feline moved its head to press against Cyndaquil's back for warmth. "So, to be clear, these are Pokédexes, right?" Sam asked. "Yup." His mother cheerfully replied. "The newest editions. Most will go to the local gym, but we'll leave a handful here for others to read and hopefully buy." Sam couldn't stop himself from grinning as he picked up the thick tome. When his mother wasn't looking, he sniffed its pages. It had the exact new book smell he had come to love. Then, he opened it up and browsed the table of contents. Right now, the number of species listed within neared over 400. Trainers used written Pokédexes like these as guides on their journeys. Pokémon gyms would hand them out to all of their hired gym trainers, and Pokémon centers tended to keep one or two publicly accessible for people to browse in their waiting rooms. Written Pokédexes contained the some knowledge humanity had on Pokémon or at least the knowledge they had on the species native to Closabi regions. This was the Hone version, primarily authored by the up-and-coming Professor Birch. Its contents focused on Hone, but it contained supporting information on Pokémon from places like Kanto, Johto, and Sinnoh. Sam knew that he had come here to help his mother unpack all the books that had arrived via boat, but he ended up sitting back and reading through the Pokédex, looking for what had changed. "So, anything new?" his mother asked several minutes later, an amused smile on her face as Sam continued to be utterly enthralled. "Professor Birch managed to narrow down a lot more abilities," Sam said. "Their passive effects some Pokémon have due to either their biology or instincts, but they have to be trained to be usable in battle. Some species actually have two listed, but do you know Bayonet? Apparently they've included the species' tendency to search people as an ability. It has a weird name. They called it Frisk." "Oh? And you just happened to notice a change in a ghost type first?" His mother said in a teasing tone. "That means nothing. I just like the type. It's cool." She snorted once. Sam felt the heat from his face turning red. "I know. I just find it funny that the first change you notice is of the type you're obsessed with." Sam held up the book to hide his expression. He didn't want his mother to know he had flipped to the ghosts first, but she was also completely right. He went on to skim it a bit more, but he also recognized he was slacking, Sam did eventually get up to help his mom take out and organize the rest of the new books. Most of these orders came from people who lived on the island, as actually getting specific books was hard without the same supply network mainland cities boasted. Ships brought books like these about once a month, or every few weeks if they were lucky. It had taken his mother years to build up her connections, and when it came to deliveries to the city, there was always a small section of those boats reserved just for this shop. He would never admit it, Sam was a teen boy, but he was proud of the level of dedication his mom had to her interests. She was commanding in conversation and always seemed to know exactly what to do. Considering it was just them, Cyndaquil, and Delcatty, Sam and his mom were rather close. All right. His mom heaved one final book onto the shelf with the rest. That should be it. Now we just need to wait for. The chime of the front door went off, and Sam's mom grinned. That must be them. Coming, she shouted. Sam's mom hurried back out to stand in the entrance of the shop, and Sam himself followed. Entering the shop was a tall man with rippling muscles and tan skin that glistened with sweat. He had a cocksure grin on his face as he strode forward and leaned against the front counter. At his side, there was a secondary set of lighter footsteps, and Sam leaned over to see what creature it was. This Pokémon was short, fat, but still muscular and covered with yellow skin. It was one of the few species almost exclusively found on the island, a Makahita. Though it was heavy like a sumo wrestler, its padded fists could pack quite the punch. Sup, the man said. Sam was already leery of how the man was smiling at his mom. I'm Buck. Recent shakeups at the gym means I took over as the one responsible for all its public dealings. You're Amanda, right? Call me Mandy, his mother replied with a smile. Sam didn't bother to hide his scowl. He was more than willing to show his displeasure at the shameful flirt as he exaggeratedly crossed his arms. Anyway, new gym leader means new systems being implemented. I'm here about the books. Yes. His mother's expression turned to excitement. This year's edition of the Pokédex. They've just come in, so I can go grab. Before she could turn around, the buff man, Buck, sucked in air through his teeth. Sam's mother stopped where she was, quick to narrow her eyes. What is it? New systems, you said, she asked. Well, you're quick to figure it out. Things have changed at the local gym. Sam's mom was already tapping her foot. The mood was quick to sour. And? You might have made that deal with us for new Pokédexes, but that was with the last gym leader, Buck said. We're doing a bit of a rework while everything's being transitioned. As it turns out, we already have new Pokédexes. And these are far better than just a few books. Yet, his mother replied testingly. At this point, she had a completely emotionless look on her face. Sam knew that meant she was ready to blow. See, they're electronic, and they come with all these neat little features that make books obsolete, Buck continued. Their inventor, some guy named Professor Oak, managed to put in a Pokémon scanner, a text-to-speech program, habitat listings, team summary, storage connection, automatic updates. So what? Sam's mother snapped. Silence permeated the air. The excitement Buck displayed only a second ago immediately cooled down. So, I've come to tell you we won't be going through with our usual deal. Sorry about that, he said. Sam's mom opened her mouth, closed it, and then seemed to come to the conclusion that she wouldn't yell about this. Instead, she took a singular, deep, calming breath, then released it slowly before talking once more. We had a deal, she said calmly. Deal's off, came his reply. I was explicitly told you'd be making this purchase last year. You've already given us some of the payment up front. Buck shrugged. We won't be paying the rest, then. Sam's mom looked at the gym trainer like he was the biggest idiot in the world. Why? Why not? We don't need the books, so we don't need to spend the money. Besides, if you ask me, it's better if our cash is used on more important purchases anyway. Sam's mother tensed, her bottom lip curling up. As for Sam himself, he stared at the man, an understanding coming to his eyes. The guy's a meathead. He might have worked for the gym, but Buck clearly thought books weren't meant for trainers that specialized in the fighting type. Yet, as soon as Sam had that thought, he realized this was an opportunity. Mind already on the subject after everything he went through earlier, he blurted something out, and the sound of his own words shocked both him and Buck. Battle me. Everyone looked Sam's way. Sam reacted by freezing up, gaping like a fish, and staying motionless until Cyndaquil yawned and trotted over to poke at his leg. "Hey!" Buck asked. "You're a gym trainer, right? That means you're great at Pokémon battles. Sure, you don't need to accept my challenge, but what if we put the status of this purchase on the line?" Buck raised an eyebrow, and the man crossed his arms, which served to cause his muscles to bulge that much more. At his side, the Makahita let its hands rest on its stomach. The weighty Pokémon stood in a distinct contrast to its well-built trainer. "Go on," Buck said. "I have a Pokémon, and you do too, a Makahita. 3 days from now, we'll have a one-on-one match. If I win, you make the purchase anyway. And if you win, what if we get all your Pokédexes for half off?" Sam went silent. He had only come up with this idea for a Pokémon battle as a way to show off to his mom. If he beat this gym trainer, he'd prove his worth, and then she'd have to say yes to him heading out. However, while Sam had brought up the concept of betting the book sale, the full implication of the idea hadn't settled in until now. With the number of written Pokédexes the gym usually bought, there would be a lot of money on the line. Not just that, but since the gym was so well liked, the negotiated profit margin was thin, too. Accepting this match and losing would mean he'd force his mother to take a major loss. Yet, she was here too, quietly listening in. Sam was too nervous to properly respond, and in the end, it was his mother who made the final decision. She silently stood there and took in both Sam and Buck. An unfamiliar look entered her eyes as she seemed to analyze everything these two had to offer. "All right," she said. "Your terms are fine." "Great." Buck's grin was far too wide. "Then I accept your challenge. 3 days till our battle. I'll meet you outside of the Pokémon Center at noon." Buck practically strode out of the bookstore, walking with a skip to his step. His Makahita loyally followed, but when Sam picked up Cyndaquil for comfort, the two Pokémon stared off before the Makahita finally stepped outside. "Why did you accept that?" Sam quietly asked. "Why did you challenge him?" his mother replied. Sam didn't have a proper answer, but then strangely enough, his mother grinned. Almost immediately after, she proceeded to snort then laugh, too. "Well, I wasn't expecting something like this today, but it worked well enough. Good job, Sam. Written Pokédexes haven't been selling well lately. That order wouldn't have gone through without you. You've just made sure we'll get a lot of stock off our shelves. But what if I lose? Then we'll be forced to sell them at a loss and I'll have to budget for the next month," she said all too nonchalantly. Sam froze up. "But that's only if you lose," his mother said. "You want to be a Pokémon trainer, right? Wouldn't this be a good first step?" Chapter 3. Sam felt like he was in a daze as he sat on his bed. His mother had been supportive, far too supportive. What is it that she actually wants? He didn't want to think about that topic. It'd been years of no discussion, and out of nowhere, she was suddenly supporting this random match. Confused and honestly worried, he turned his thoughts to something else, namely, the location where his future opponent worked. A Pokémon gym. Pokémon gyms were institutions that served as challenges for the average Pokémon trainer's journey. At one point in almost every person's life, they would take a break from school, work, and whatever other responsibilities they had to catch Pokémon, make friends, and explore their local region. Sam hadn't gone on his Pokémon journey just yet, mostly because things had come up back when he was first making plans. Cyndaquil had still joined him regardless, but he hadn't exactly trained or even gained the experience needed to take on someone strong enough to work for a gym. Gyms were places to be conquered, to earn badges that marked a Pokémon trainer's success. Earn 8, and you could compete in that region's yearly conference. Earn less, and all you get is a bit of bragging rights. If Buck was a gym trainer, that meant he had been recognized as a trainer either strong or skilled enough to help maintain the challenges so many faced during the 9-month-long Pokémon League season. That Makahita was likely a veteran of many fights. Sure, it might not have been evolved, but assuming it was as much of a novice as Cyndaquil had been an awful mistake. Those thoughts only served to increase his nerves further. Sam hopped off his bed and began to pace. As he did, Cyndaquil moved off his lap to watch him. Her head tracked him back and forth. Sam was inside his bedroom, which was actually the building's attic. Its entrance was located within his family's living space behind the store. A door connected the store to their home, but only he, his mother, and their Pokémon were allowed to pass through. Downstairs was a connected living room and kitchen, and up here was his personal space and shared storage. Boxes littered one half of the room, but the other, more empty half, was very decidedly his. Pausing, Sam scratched at his own arm nervously, terrified about the lengths he'd need to go to pull off a win. His worried moment was interrupted when Cyndaquil squeaked. Being reminded she was there, he affectionately patted her head. "I'm sorry. I'm just stressed." Cyndaquil turned towards the floor as Sam sat back down. A second later, she was in his lap, relying on puppy therapy to help calm him down. It worked. Kind of. Sam absent-mindedly scratched behind her head and turned his thoughts to a more productive topic. So a Makahita is a fighting type. According to the latest Pokédex, its ability is Guts, which means trying to burn it will just give it adrenaline to fuel its attacks. We could still burn it to potentially wear it down over time, but the only moves we have at our disposal are Tackle, Leer, Smokescreen, and Ember. None of those are that strong. The sound that left Cyndaquil's mouth almost sounded like an apology, but Sam immediately shook his head. "Don't apologize. Neither of us have gone out of our way to train. If I actually bothered to take you out to battle instead of just reading all day, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation." Mainly, Sam was disappointed in himself. At the time, the challenge had seemed like such a good idea. The man was a Pokémon trainer. And Pokémon trainers resolved issues via battle. If Sam wanted to be a Pokémon trainer too, why wouldn't he try to do the same? "Well, for starters, I don't have any experience actually leading Pokémon in battle." The thought made him sigh. He then heard a series of footsteps from the lower floor before hearing his mom shout. "I just finished closing the store for the day. I'll be up in a second." Shortly after, the trapdoor to his bedroom creaked open, and Delcatty poked her head through. She bounded over to Sam's bed to join his side, and his mother followed. She didn't say anything as she finished climbing up the ladder. Silently, Sam's mom moved to sit on the bed next to him. Though she didn't look upset in the slightest, she still let a few seconds of silence hang. "Will," she eventually said, breathing out. "Someday, hey." Sam briefly thought back to everything that happened at the abandoned mansion, then to everything that happened in the store. "Yeah, you can say that." He chuckled a bit to himself. "Look, Sam. I know you're worried about the battle, but I've only seen one person more dedicated to Pokémon than you, and that man was your grandfather. You practically inhale any books we get about Pokémon, and when you're not reading those, you're on the computer browsing. What did you call it?" "The Ghost-type forum, Mom," he said. "The Ghost-type forum, right," she said. "But please, listen to me and know that you can do this. If I ask about going on my journey now, would she approve?" He turned to his mother. She was smiling at him. He remembered the last time he had asked and the grim look that overtook her face. "All right, so what do I do?" he asked. He chose not to bring up the subject right now. "Rely on our secret weapon," his mother easily replied. "What? What, yourself, mister? Did you not realize we have a secret weapon in the room right with us?" Sam stared at his mom blankly, and she chuckled. Delcatty released a few amused meows herself, as well. Silently, his mom waved her hand to gesture to the boxes that filled the other half of the attic. "Your father was a Pokémon ranger when he passed, and my dad, your grandfather, was a powerful trainer before he retired," she started. "We never really unpacked their stuff after moving, but I bet if we search, we could find something that they wrote down to help you in your preparations." Sam looked at the pile with a new perspective. Before, it was just junk that took up space. Now, it could actually contain something worthwhile. Though daunted by the sheer amount of work ahead of him, Sam was willing to do it if it meant he would win. "Let's do it," he said. His mother's smile was as bright as the sun. "That's the spirit. The best time to start is right now. You get that side, and I'll get the other. I'm sure we'll find something by the end of the night." And just like that, Sam and his mother began to dig through piles of junk to hopefully find anything that would mean a victory against Buck. Cyndaquil was quick to help, using her snout to sniff out items of interest and going out of her way to organize items set aside. Delcatty seemed as though she just wanted to relax on the bed, but Sam's mom informed the feline that wouldn't be the case. With a reluctant mrow, Delcatty hopped off and unhappily assisted by pushing a few spare boxes towards Sam and his mother. It meant they only needed to search, and with everyone involved, the group made slow but consistent progress. Piles of shirts, old blankets, and towels, and sets of uninteresting knickknacks were pulled out, looked over, and placed on the floor. There was a brief break to look through a yellowed photo album, but Sam and his mom determinedly parsed through box after box, searching every inch of the attic they could. An hour passed, and it felt like they had hardly put even a dent into the pile. Sam at least took some comfort in the fact that this was technically training his and Cyndaquil's strength, but unless they dedicated themselves to more serious practice, it wouldn't be enough. Still, Cyndaquil had come to Sam solely because of his grandfather. The man had trained a wild Cyndaquil himself, eventually battling alongside a powerful Typhlosion. The idea of some kind of trick being hidden within these boxes wasn't actually that ridiculous. Likely, Sam's grandfather had written down insights about Cyndaquil's species that Sam could use to shape the way his friend trained. Though, he never found any. Soon enough, shadows from outside began to stretch into the room, and the only light they had was that of a lamp Sam had near his bed. Dust lingered in the air, having been disturbed from all of the shifting of boxes. Sam had thought he was tired before, but after all of this searching, he was utterly exhausted. He ended up slumping back into his desk chair as his mom swiped her hands together, trying to get some of that dust off. "Well, I think I'll get started on dinner. This is enough for today." "Sounds good," Sam replied. A hearty meal sounded absolutely delicious right now. His mom replied with a supportive smile and a wave of her hand before she disappeared back down the ladder. Delcatty joined her, leaving just Sam and Cyndaquil alone in this room. "One more box," he said. Cyndaquil groaned, but she still went along with the work. Sam moved forward, grabbed the edge of one of the cardboard containers, and he pulled it back to give himself room to look through it. Just like so many others, this contained many sheets and towels leftovers from the variety of beds his grandfather had purchased for his Pokémon in his old age. Most of those individuals had either passed away shortly after or had been sent to caretakers who could better afford to take care of them. Cyndaquil's own grandfather was still around, and that Typhlosion lived with a specialized breeder over in Johto. Despite just being miscellaneous sheets, Sam knew they were likely filled with memories. He didn't toss them aside, but he did make sure to treat them carefully. Looking around the room, he took in how one man's entire life was essentially reduced down to miscellaneous items stored into boxes. It was a heavy thought to consider, so he pushed it out of his mind. As he turned back to this last box, shuffling sounds came from inside. Cyndaquil had climbed in, and now she was repeating her name rather excitedly. "What is it?" "Found something." He pulled one last blanket back. Standing proud, Cyndaquil balanced on her back feet with her front paws pressed into her sides. Underneath her was a wooden chest just big enough to hold in two hands. "Whoa," Sam breathed. The chest had tarnished bronze handles on each side, and it was made up of some kind of dark wood. Carvings decorated its surface, displaying myths and legends commonly known in Kanto, such as the region's legendary birds. It was finely made and definitely impressive. Cyndaquil jumped out, and Sam lifted it up. "This is..." He really hoped the chest would contain exactly what they were looking for. Sam brought it over to his desk. It was both lighter and heavier than he expected. The wood was dense, and items made a few faint noises inside. There was definitely worthwhile stuff contained within. No lock, only a single latch held it closed. It was easy enough to unclick to allow the top to open up. He sat up to better peer in, and Cyndaquil joined him on the table to search, too. There were only a handful of items in here, but each one carried obvious sentimental value to the long-past, old man. The first item Sam pulled out was a set of postcards from cities across Kanto and Johto. None were filled out, but they showed pictures of famous locations and attractions, most of them having been taken decades ago. Next was one half of a Pokeball, but specifically one half of an old-fashioned version of one. It was metallic unpainted and a knob on its top served as the sealing mechanism instead of the commonly used button Pokeballs used now. Unfortunately, the other half of the Pokeball didn't seem to be present. Altogether, it was nothing more than a long-lost memory. After the Pokeball, Sam pulled out a few different items one by one. A rock with a strange, domed bulge to it. A feather divided between red, white, and green that seemed to sparkle rainbow in the light. A framed photo showing off a trio of young adults, with only one of which having the dark hair that would signify him as Sam's grandfather. The other boy in the picture was nervously holding some kind of sketchbook and had weirdly long, hanging sideburns, and next to them was a smirking young woman with bright, blonde hair. Sam stared at the photograph for a while. He had never seen his grandfather so young. Still, he moved on to the next item shortly after. This one was an old case, which he opened up and immediately took in a breath. Whoa! If Grandpa had all of these, he probably took on the gym challenge right when it started getting popular. The case contained a badge from every gym in Johto and Kanto. In total, there were 16, somehow still polished, pins. Finally, there was only a single item left, located at the very bottom of this chest. Sam had to stand up to get the leverage to reach in, and he held it up once it was firmly in his hands. A package? Well, it says to Richard, so it was definitely sent to my grandpa. I wonder why he never opened it up. It doesn't say who it's from. Sam looked to Cyndaquil. She was looking right back. Shrugging, Sam went ahead and removed the string that kept the canvas paper on it. A single pull, and practically most of it fell away. When he had first picked it up, it had almost felt familiar. Now that he had gone ahead to reveal what it was, he figured out why. It's a book. He forced himself to calm down. Sam silently admitted he was acting a bit too excited for just one item. No title. Weird. Maybe it has what we're looking for? Let's see what's inside. The book was more like a journal, though it was both old and thick enough that the word tome was probably a better descriptor. Its front cover had been stamped with an indent of a Pokeball, but it was the first interior page that stated what it was. The new Pokédex. The text was proudly printed just past the front cover. Curiously, no author was written, but Sam found it interesting for something so old to make such a bold declaration with its name. Then, intrigued, Sam flipped past a forward to reach the table of contents, which seemed to go on for a while. He began to read through, flipped the page, continued to read through, flipped the page, read through. This. What? This can't be real. Each entry listed in the table was numbered by the classical entry in the Pokédex. It started with Bulbasaur, simply enough, and it continued on to include all of the Pokémon from Kanto, too. Then, from there, the species of Johto were listed, then Hoenn, then Sinnoh, and Unova and Kalos and Alola and Galar, and it had so many more species that Sam hadn't even heard of. He had to put it down just to process what he had been holding in his hands. To state it bluntly, where modern Pokédexes had only a few hundred entries, this book boasted over 1,000. The table of contents presented the potential of impossible information, yet the book was at least several decades old. Chapter 4. Dear reader, I know the information within may seem unbelievable, but you must throw those compunctions aside. This journal contains the culmination of my life's work, both of this life and last. Decades of effort went into assembling everything here, and countless Pokémon and trainers contributed to ensure the veracity of what is written. It is my deepest wish for this work to illuminate the potential of future generations. Dear reader, believe me, everything in this book is completely and utterly true. The words from the unknown author's foreword echoed in Sam's mind. The very first thing he had done once he was finished processing the book's existence was to flip back to the foreword and actually read it through. He then proceeded to skim through all of the book's entries before sitting back in his chair. He returned to the foreword again. He reread what was written just in case. Completely and utterly true, it says, he mumbled. Sam had snuck downstairs and gathered up one of the latest Pokédexes, which now sat on his desk next to him. His mother had commented on it when she noticed him sneak by while she made dinner, but Sam provided the easy excuse of just planning out training, Mom. He did the responsible thing and tried to check if this so-called new Pokédex was actually real. While he didn't have a way to test any of the information on foreign Pokémon, for obvious reasons, one thing still stood out to him. This decades-old book listed abilities that had only been discovered in the past year. Heck, Bayonet was clearly listed as having the ability, Frisk. Truth be told, Sam didn't want to believe this book existed. It was called the new Pokédex, yet it was just so old. Pokémon researchers and professors were in a constant race to discover more and more about Pokémon species, both known and undiscovered, but what was the point of all that if this book held all the answers? It felt like a blow to the stomach, so Sam denied it. After all, if something like this existed, more of the information it contained would be public, right? He continued to stare at it, genuinely unsure what to do. Do I believe it? Do I pretend it's all made up? Or, do I take things into my own hands? His mom called out to say that dinner was ready. More than willing to have an excuse to leave, Sam climbed down the ladder out of his room while Cyndaquil hopped down the steps to follow. In the center of his kitchen was a small, rounded dining table with raised stools to allow both Delcatty and Cyndaquil to eat alongside Sam and his mom. Plates of battered Pokémon food with sliced berries on the side were laid out for the pair, and for the two humans' meals, Sam's mom had made his favorite, spaghetti. Yet, Sam no longer had an appetite. He wanted to worry about the implications of the book he found, but at the same time, he had no clue what those implications even were. He sat down, and his mom smiled warmly at him. Cyndaquil jumped up into her chair at the same time. Delcatty was already gracefully chowing down on pre-cut chunks of food, but Cyndaquil wanted to wait for everyone else to start, so Sam forced a few bites down. "So," Sam's mom said. "Managed to find anything interesting up there while I've been gone?" He stared at his food. Sam really didn't feel like eating. "Maybe," he said. "Oh? What did you find?" I found a few notes Grandpa left on Cyndaquil. They should help with training," Sam lied. Sam wasn't sure why he didn't tell the truth, but it felt like his insides were churning. He didn't want to subject his mother to that same level of confusion. Who wrote that book? How did they get that information? Most importantly, why did his grandfather have it? That's wonderful. Sam's mom gained a bright smile, one that was completely unaware of his internal dilemma. Are the notes useful? What do they say? Do you think you'll be able to prepare enough in time? Maybe, Sam said with a shrug. He took his fork and spun noodles around it. I'm not sure if they're real or not. I checked parts of it, but I'm worried that they might be outdated. His mother tapped her chin before taking another bite of her food. She made sure to properly swallow before speaking next. How'd you check? She asked. Took one of the extra Pokédexes and compared bits and pieces. Everything added up. Have you tried other resources, too? Other resources? Well, you spend so long on that computer of ours that I'd figure you might be able to ask some of your friends online, his mom said. Sam almost dropped his fork when she said that. Of course. Active trainers will know more than just what some random book says. Most written books included information gathered from trainers who actively train certain uncommon Pokémon species. Heck, it wasn't rare for professors who wrote the Pokédexes to pay trainers to fill out surveys and forms. That's perfect. Thanks, Mom. I know exactly what to do now. You've been a big help. I love you. She smiled again and waved a hand. Oh, now you're just making me blush. Sam shoveled the food in his mouth, rushing through the meal with gusto. Once he was done, he dumped his plate in the sink before helping with the dishes. Then, he ran to the corner of the living room where the family computer sat. It was big, blocky, and protected by a thick, white case. The monitor was as deep as it was wide, and the computer tower wasn't that much better at that. The primary purpose of obtaining this computer was less about having access to websites and more about giving his mother a way to manage emails. While video phones were still the primary form of contact, the ease at which emails let her make orders with companies on the mainland was too much to pass up. But Sam frequently commandeered the device, mostly for his own entertainment. While online chat rooms were popular uses for the internet these days, Sam primarily used his internet access to visit one specific type of site, specialist forums. Of course, Sam was obsessed with the idea of the ghost type, and when he heard of a way to talk to ghost type trainers across the world, he immediately jumped on it. There were forum boards dedicated to each of the 17 types. Ghost might have not been the most popular choice, but seeing people share their stories and post links to battles in the League video archive was really something else. Though, Sam was still a boy. There were times where the site was used for more entertainment-based purposes, where he browsed threads dedicated to sharing creepy stories. Users would post folktales and campfire stories, often pretending to be characters within the very tales themselves. They'd become travelers detailing trips into dusky forests, gaining and losing members of their group without realizing. Haunted objects would be discussed, and then the item's owner would share strange experiences they had around the house. The one with the most variants was a tale about a parent whose child was stolen by a Jengar. Despite the subject, it was usually the most light-hearted, as the entertainment came from how the storyteller would ridiculously ignore all advice to an extreme extent. However, as Sam's mother got ready for bed, Sam wasn't on this site for entertainment this time. Instead, he had a specific task in mind, and he waited until his mother had closed the door to her bedroom to retrieve the journal from his room. The new Pokédex's organization was kind of a mess. It seemed to drift between technical summaries and relevant, personal anecdotes, but the very back section of it contained a description of all included moves. Immediately drawn to where ghost-type attacks were discussed, his eyes locked onto one move in particular. Sam began to quietly whisper what he typed, planning out what to say. New move idea, Sam mumbled quietly. Hey everyone! I have an idea for a move I wanted to try out, no ghost types on my team. Keyboard clacks echoed out into the otherwise silent living room. Ghost types were known for their highly limited movesets, usually being forced to rely on status moves like Hypnosis or moves of other types like Psychic and Thunderbolt. The only attacking moves commonly known were Nightshade and Shadow Ball, but those had their own problems and quirks that made many reluctant to use them. After all, Nightshade was directly tied to a Pokémon's personal level of power, and many still argued that Shadow Ball relied on a Pokémon's physical strength rather than its special attack. For this, Sam pulled one potential ghost-type attacking move out of the book. Getting it confirmed here would both help his verification needs and set him up with a potential new strategy for his eventual ghost-type team. This attack might not have been as strong as Shadow Ball, but that was only true most of the time. Including an attack not known to any local region, Sam wrote out the description of a move called Hex. Apparently, it was an Unnovan attacking move, but Sam hardly knew anything about that far-off region. While common there, it hadn't spread here yet, but he really wanted to know if it was true. Hex damaged the user's opponent with, well, a hex, but it was extra effective on Pokémon with status conditions. Combining it with the commonly known Will-O-Wisp would turn the two attacks into a devastating combination. All in all, a perfect strategy for the ghost type. Let me know what you think, Sam said, finishing it off. He sat back in his chair and reread the post once he was done. This was a suggestion to test rather than an explicit discovery. He didn't want to lose this potential advantage, after all. Satisfied with what he wrote, he hit enter. The thread was created. Alright, Cyndaquil. With this posted online, we'll know whether or not the new Pokédex is real when people reply. Maybe someone is already using the move, or maybe someone will figure it out from my description. Either way, it should confirm something. Now that he had a way to genuinely prove it, he wanted it to be true so he could take advantage of it for himself. The light went off in his mother's room. Sam got up to turn off all the other lights in the house, too. The only light was from the computer, and the whir of its fans provided the sole bit of sound in the room. He stared at the flickering screen. Watching. Waiting. Praying for a reply. The internet wasn't the fastest in these parts, so every minute or so he'd refresh the page, and every minute or so, the refreshed page would be finished loading. The first response came soon enough. Dumb idea. Keep it to yourself next time. That kind of dismissal was expected, not every random person online was kind. A few more people posted their comments discussing the potential of the idea, but Sam's saving grace came in the form of a reply from someone with the username Matsuba. Their response was simple. Sounds interesting. I'll give it a try. We got one. Sam cheered. Despite all his previous worries, he couldn't help but to gain a smile. They'll test out the attack for us, and if it's real, we'll know we have something valuable on our hands. I really hope it is. Imagine if that entire book is true. We could do things no one else could dream of. Sam was grinning, but in his lap, Cyndaquil let out a tired yawn. Blinking his eyes, he checked the time, past midnight. Hey! It's later than I thought. The exhaustion of the day getting to him, Sam carried Cyndaquil in his arms to return to his bed. There, he went to sleep with a specific dream in his mind. When that book is confirmed true, I'll crush Buck with everything we got. Sam woke up early the next day and rushed back to the computer. Cyndaquil stayed in bed as the computer whirred to life downstairs. A few minutes after pressing the power button, Sam managed to navigate to the relevant site. To his horror, the forum moderators had deleted his thread, citing that suggestions needed to be kept to the pinned sections. However, he had received a private message. It was from Matsuba, and it contained only 2 words. It worked. Chapter 5. Matsuba's 2-word response sat front and center on the computer screen as Sam blankly stared forward. It's real, he whispered. He had known it probably was back when he checked it against a Pokédex, but it took seeing a completely alien source confirming it for everything to fit together in his mind. It took several full seconds for his thoughts to settle down before Sam jumped up and rushed to his bedroom's ladder. Cyndaquil, he shouted. It's real. We can use the information. He scurried upstairs and practically body-slammed his desk chair. It spun in place, letting him face the table of his desk, where the new Pokédex was laid out in front of him. Let's see. Cyndaquil. On page. Wow, that's far in. He hurriedly flipped through as his Pokémon woke up on the bed next to him. She smacked her lips and waddled over, where she clumsily climbed up onto the desk only to fall into Sam's lap and resume her slumber. Information about your evolutions are on the next few pages, but we don't need to worry about that right now. Instead, we can look at what you can learn as a Cyndaquil and maybe your abilities, too. I know in the base Pokédex man, I can't believe I'm already calling a modern text the base version. You have a limited list of learnable moves. There, other than what you already know, you could learn Quick Attack, Flame Wheel, Swift, and Flamethrower. Here, you can learn. Sam breathed out when he saw the expansive list before him. More moves than he thought available were listed, and there were many he had never heard of. Flame Charge? Lava Plume? Inferno? Heck, you can learn Rollout. They all sounded extremely powerful, and he couldn't wait to get started. What about your abilities? The base book just states you get Blaze. Blaze was an ability that would let Cyndaquil empower her fire-type moves when in a state close to unconsciousness. It was still listed as a potential ability in his grandfather's book, but next to it, it stated she could gain the ability Flash Fire. That's incredible, Sam breathed. With a bit of work, you could become utterly immune to other fire-type moves. Not just that, but when hit by one, you could learn to use that heat to empower yourself. Sam couldn't help but to laugh. This book was incredible. Literally no one else in the world knew this kind of stuff. It was an incredible advantage. Everything all right up there, called his tired mother from below. Everything's great, Mom. Sam shouted. Everything's perfect, actually. He laughed again and started to scratch Cyndaquil affectionately. She was still half asleep, but she looked up at him and smiled. There's not much in the way of actual training tips in here, but it gives me ideas for how we can move forward. I said 3 days until our battle with Buck, so we have today and tomorrow to train until then. To start, let's start with the basics. I want to make sure we can handle proper commands. Back at the mansion, Cyndaquil had frozen when she and Sam had encountered Whismore. As simple as it was, Sam needed to make sure they could work together with an instinctual reaction to commands. When Sam shouted a move, Cyndaquil needed to be ready to act. At the same time, he needed to learn how to phrase things to get the best response out of her in battle. I need a tool for this. A clicker, I think, he mumbled. Clickers let Sam make a loud noise with the press of his finger. Getting Cyndaquil to react to that noise would be a good start, and then they could shift to issuing and following commands once she got a base reaction down. Alright Cyndaquil, we're going to the Pokemart. Wake up. Sam placed her on the bed as he started to get dressed and grab his backpack. Cyndaquil groaned as she pushed herself up, but she stumbled and fell back down. Sam had to pause and recognize he was running off of nervous excitement. As it stood, neither of them had eaten breakfast yet. One hearty meal and a shout of thanks to his mother later, Sam and Cyndaquil were out of the house. Once more, she was riding in his jacket's hood as Sam practically charged down the street. When practicing commands, we can work double time, too, Sam said, so many ideas coming together in his mind. Knowing what fire-type moves you'll eventually learn can shape what we practice. Already, I can see it's worth working on Ember to train your special power and aim. He was practically humming as he strode down the street. He wasn't exactly running, but he was definitely moving much faster than everyone else around him. The Pokemart was located only a few blocks away, just like every other point of interest in this small town. Its blue roof made it stand out from the surrounding red brick buildings, and its clear, glass doors welcomed in all potential customers. Yet, despite all of that, Dewford's Pokemart was as standard as Pokemarts could come. It served as a Pokemon League subsidized market that sold goods for trainers of every form. In fact, the building was where Sam and his mom bought food for their Pokemon. Though, this time around, he'd be buying actual training supplies. A pair of automatic doors slid open as Sam arrived at the store. He gripped the strap of his backpack and felt the weight of the new Pokédex as he took a step in. He immediately stopped where he stood when he saw a familiar man leaning against the Pokemart's front counter. Oh, it's you. Mark and I were just talking about our battle coming up. Sam's mood immediately soured. He glared at Buck with all of the hatred he could muster. Oh yeah? Sam asked tersely. Yup. Told him about how you challenged me to make a purchase in your store. Sam's eye twitched. Ah, it's a pretty simple deal altogether, Buck continued. I buy a bunch of books if he wins. I get it all half off when I win. The 10th gym trainer laughed heartily. At his side, the apron-wearing Pokemart employee had on his best customer service smile. Will you need help finding what you need? The employee asked Sam. I'll be fine, Sam replied, tense. Buck just grinned as Sam marched into an aisle. He did his best to focus on finding what he wanted to purchase instead of that awful man. You know, I'm kind of surprised you're actually taking this seriously. I was just training at Granite Cave and I didn't see you there, Buck said. That's where all the real Pokemon trainers in these parts go to practice. Novices usually stick to public fields outside of Pokemon centers. Or absolute beginners practice around their home. Sam bit his tongue rather than responding. I was planning on working with Cyndaquil in the alley out back. He stared at the rows and rows of tools related to Pokemon training, but he was unable to pick any of them out. Buck's taunting tone echoed in his ears, and Sam couldn't stop himself from clenching his fists. Well, whatever, the man said, pushing off of the counter. New gym leader means new workout routines, too. He's still getting everything set up. Buck walked over to the door of the Pokemart and pointed a set of finger guns at the worker, a brilliant smile on his face. Be seeing you, Mark. I'll send someone to pick up our purchase later. The sound of the automatic door opening and closing signaled the man leaving. Yet, even with Buck's absence, Sam could only stare blankly forward. From behind the front counter, the Pokemart employee sighed. I'm sorry about that. He's been letting his new position get to his head. Are you sure there's nothing I can do for you? Yeah, punch him for me. But Sam didn't say that. Instead, he continued to stare. No one else was inside of this Pokemart. It was only Sam, Cyndaquil, and the Pokemart employee. Slowly, he bent down, pretending to look at the items on the lowest shelf. Instead, he pulled his backpack to be in front of his arm. Then, he began to retrieve a certain, impossible book. Do you trust me, Cyndaquil? She leaned forward from his hood, letting him see her, and then she nodded her head. Good. Because I want to crush that man. And 2 days of training isn't enough. Instead, Sam flipped through the pages, bringing the full brunt of his secret weapon to bear. Cyndaquil silently watched from over his shoulder as Sam determinedly searched for a species he could use. Shuppet was out. The home native species couldn't be found on this island. Duskull wasn't available either. This book might have been oddly specific about where Pokemon lived, but as far as Sam could tell, there weren't any other ghost types available on Dewford. Then, however, Sam went for a long shot and looked for one last home native species he was aware of, Sabai. Normally, Pokédexes only listed it as appearing in the non-specific location of caves. Here in this book? When Sam flipped to the entry on Sabai, its location could not be clearer. It's in the place Buck just mentioned. Granite Cave. As Buck was a Dewford gym trainer, he shared a speciality with the gym's favored type. He didn't just have a few fighting-type Pokemon, but likely, they were all he trained. For this upcoming match, Sam knew the man would be using the fighting-type Makahita. He was also unlikely to field any alternatively typed surprise. With that information in mind, Sam thought back to the ghost type. When it came to its effectiveness in battle, one of the many reasons he liked it so much was that most ghosts were great at phasing through basic physical attacks. Not just that, but the ghost type was specifically immune to both normal and fighting type moves, the two types of moves Buck would likely rely on in their fight. There was more to it as well, as Sabai was even better than that. Not only was it a ghost type, but Sabai also was part dark type, which let it resist types it would otherwise be weak to. It had no weaknesses, which meant that it was the perfect counter to anything Buck sent out. In other words, catching one would let Sam destroy that man. He was already planning out viable strategies in his mind. Quickly, with the book confirming this choice for him, Sam rushed to gather up a different set of supplies. An escape rope. A potion. A can of powdered quartz. And as for the most important item, Sam already had one. Still in his pocket was the unused Pokeball intended for the ghost type in the mansion that never came. Though, even without the Pokeball, the sum of the purchase drained Sam of all of his savings. He had already spent over $200, and this took everything else he had. In a way, choosing to suddenly shift gears towards catching a Sabai might have been an abrupt move to make. Yet, Sam knew and lived the ghost type. There was no doubt in his mind that catching one would absolutely guarantee the win he sought. "You okay there?" the Pokemart employee asked. Sam looked up. "Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm fine." The man looked unconvinced, but he still scanned the items and took Sam's cash. Once the transaction was completed, Sam scooped it all up and moved to march out the door. "Hey!" Sam paused when the Pokemart employee called out to him. "You! Don't do anything stupid, all right?" Sam grinned. "Don't worry," he said. "I don't think anything I do can be considered stupid, anymore." Chapter 6. Granite Cave was located half an hour away from the north side of Dewford. There were two alternate routes to get to it, either take stairs up to a path through the island's interior woods, or take a path along the beach that trainers frequented. Sam took the forest path, which was longer but lacked the trainer population. He only had Cyndaquil on him, and he hadn't had enough money to afford anything more than one potion. Engaging in battle was the quickest way to train a Pokémon, but Sam needed her to be in good shape if they were going to explore a cave. "Here's the plan: we sneak in so no one stops us, and then we search until we find a Sabai. I'll use my flashlight to light up the area around us, so you just stay healthy so you can weaken it until I make the catch." Cyndaquil made an unsure hum on his shoulder. She was still sitting in his hood. Hearing her hesitance, Sam did his best not to grimace. "It won't be like the mansion. We know for a fact that there's at least one species of ghost type that dwells here." She hummed again, but for all of her nervousness, she still seemed content with letting Sam continue forward. They walked in silence as trees loomed around them. No humans were nearby, but occasionally, Sam heard the squawk of the coastal wingull in the distance. The peak of a rocky hill soon poked up above the trees. Approaching it, the sound of waves lapping against its side mixed with the sound of cracking rocks. Sam kept himself close to the forest's edge without making himself known. Looking ahead, the entrance to Granite Cave wasn't just one opening, but a whole series of holes in that hill with trainers all around. Each one of them had at least one Pokémon out, and they were either engaged in battle with one another or attacking loose stones. Pokémon like Machop and Machoke punched rocks to practice their attacks. Other species, like Meditite and Medicham, exchanged blows in spar-like battles. There wasn't any way to approach without being seen, so Sam waited until most of the trainers had turned away. He kept to the shadows, staying at the base of a curving cliff, walking all the way up to the closest entrance he could see. Everyone here seemed too busy with their own practice to pay a single, random trainer any mind. Most of the people here were adults, too, but there were a handful of trainers that did seem to be around his age. Sam blended into the crowd, and no one sought to stop him. Upon reaching his destination, he glanced one last time over his shoulder, then disappeared into the cave's interior, where he turned on his flashlight. "Phew," he sighed. "Easier than I thought." Sam went to help Cyndaquil out of his hood. Bracing her on his arm, he went ahead and set her on the ground. "So, I don't really know the first thing about cave exploration," Sam said quietly. Cyndaquil shrunk in on herself, visibly uncomfortable. No. Don't worry. We at least know fire isn't too common here. If we focus on your ember, we should be able to scare any wild Pokémon off, right?" She nodded slowly, obviously unconvinced. Sam did his best to send her a reassuring grin, but it didn't seem to help. "Everything will be fine." "Probably." He couldn't think of anything else to say, so Sam took a step forward. Cyndaquil followed after him. Then, together, the pair of Pokémon and trainer moved deeper into Granite Cave. This place was big, but it seemed like that was solely because this room served as the cave's connected entrance. Other openings from across the cliffside let in light to reveal a massive cavern that stretched out in all directions. Stalactites and stalagmites hung on the ceiling and stood on the floor. Rocks littered the landscape, and a few smaller pathways curved around the upper walls. Sam could see various tunnels that led deeper down. Moving the beam of his flashlight around, he couldn't see any wild Pokémon, though. He figured he needed to head deeper inside. "I know we ended up not practicing, but be ready to respond to my voice," Sam whispered. "We can't afford to freeze up in a place like this. When I say ember, immediately spit out your move." A quiet whine left Cyndaquil's throat as she nervously agreed. The pitter-patter of her tiny footsteps echoed out, though, Sam's human-sized footfalls echoed a lot worse. Water dripped every so often. The air was uncomfortably cold. Sam pulled his jacket tighter as he and Cyndaquil moved to one of the interior entrances. The tunnel sloped down into darkness. Neither he nor Cyndaquil began their descent right away. After all, the light of Sam's flashlight didn't reach all the way through. "I don't want to get lost," he mumbled. "We'll head down, and as soon as it levels out, I'll set up the bait where we know we can find our way out again, all right?" Another whine from Cyndaquil. He could feel her press against his leg. Not having any further reason to stall, Sam headed down. Cyndaquil kept in pace. It was nerve-wracking to feel how this sloped floor went deeper and deeper into the earth. Sam had been in a basement before, of course, but this was a cave. It was literally something else. The tunnel continued and continued and continued. The stone floor itself was rough but worn down through the efforts of wild Pokémon. Without access to easy healing like Pokémon with trainers, many wild individuals resorted to using their moves on their surroundings for safer practice. Eventually, though, the path did level out as Sam expected and split off into several different ways. Though, Sam didn't take any other path. He shined his light down to check on Cyndaquil, saw she was still safe, then he took a specific item out of his pack. "Saba, I eat crystals," Sam said. "They're not like other Pokémon since that's what sustains them. The powdered quartz I bought is usually an additive for rock-type Pokémon meals, but I think a Saba I would enjoy it, too." As Cyndaquil watched, Sam moved to the center of the room and poured out a small pile of the quartz. Surprisingly, the air down here wasn't perfectly still. There was the slightest of whines, but it wasn't enough to blow away any of the grains. "There. That's a third of the bottle. That'll lure a Sabai, right?" Cyndaquil didn't make any noises to express her thoughts. Sam would have thought she had disappeared, but he still felt her passive heat. Instead, she was trying to stay as quiet as possible just in case, so Sam went quiet to join her efforts. Without having anything else to do but ready himself, Sam moved back up to hide in the entrance tunnel. There, he began to wait. And wait. And wait. Down here, hours passed slowly. Sam had nothing to do and no way to tell the time. Considering the most he ever left the house was just to travel a few blocks away in town, he never had the need to purchase a watch, either. He could have trained with Cyndaquil, but that was noisy and Sam didn't want to scare away any potential wild encounters. Although the tunnel downwards was long, they were still close enough to the busy entrance that Pokémon were rare. He hoped that the pile of quartz would be enough. Time passed, and he and Cyndaquil stared at the pile of quartz without anything to do. He was tempted to pull out the book, but at the same time, he didn't want to risk it getting damaged. "The flashlight can last up to 12 hours, Sam mumbled. "I guess if it starts to flicker, we'll know it's time to head out." That would mean Sam was gone all day, but if it also meant ensuring a victory against Buck, it was a sacrifice he was willing to make. As his watch continued, Cyndaquil moved over to paw at him to get him to sit down. There, she hopped into his lap and curled up into a ball. Her fire-type body meant she was like a heated pillow, and the warmth made Sam's eyes start to close. "No. I can't fall asleep." His shout was more like a loud whisper than anything else. Cyndaquil's warmth sunk into his bones. His eyelids felt heavy. He continued to watch the pile of quartz dust and watched and watched and watched and watched. "Maybe it won't be so bad if I close them for just a moment?" Boredom was a powerful motivator to get someone to rest. In the end, Sam wasn't sure how long he slept, but his eyes snapped open to an unnatural noise. "Scrtch, scrtch. His heart raced in his chest. Cyndaquil practically jumped out of his lap. Sam stumbled but shifted around just enough to let his flashlight illuminate the quartz pile. Sam blinked. The wild Pokémon blinked back. A girlish Maywile, a small, humanoid steel type with a massive, extra pair of jaws, stared at Sam in shock while holding a coarse rock in its hand. The wild Maywile, though a rare Pokémon, was not the species Sam was looking for. It shoved the stone it was carrying into its mouth and scurried off, causing Sam to sigh. That wasn't it. That wasn't a Sabai. It. Scrtch, scrtch. The same scratching noise rang out. A bit of dust fell from the ceiling. Dreading what he was about to see, Sam brought the light of his flashlight up. Two glints in the darkness stared back. Sam went stock still when he saw the gemstone eyes of a wild Pokémon staring right at him. A perfectly white row of sharpened teeth stretched out into a Cheshire grin. Around it, fur colored the deep purple of the middle of the night helped it blend into the darkness, but stones on its body let the light properly reveal it. The creature hung off the ceiling with sharpened claws. Sam almost dropped his flashlight. He took a stumbling step back. The wild Pokémon, the very species he had come here to find, dropped down and landed a foot from the pile. Sable, it said, making some sort of chittering noise. Li. Though it was generally agreed Pokémon spoke in variations of their species' name, it always came out more like animalistic sounds. In this case, something about the way Sabai spoke caused shivers to go down Sam's spine. I. He struggled to get any words to leave his mouth. This was genuinely the first time in his entire life he had personally seen a ghost type. Honestly, it was even more terrifying than he thought. I love it. Despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, Sam brought his free hand forward in a point, the same pose he had seen all of the trainers on TV make. Cyndaquil. Ember. She squeaked in surprise and didn't use the move right away. Still, it only took her a second to act, and the flames on her back burst into full blast as she opened up her mouth and released the called for attack. Globs of flaming spittle shot forward in a wide, poorly aimed spray. The Sabai somehow grinned even wider, and it took many, quick steps backwards to completely avoid the attack. Again! Sam shouted, but the wild Sabai was already moving forward. Cyndaquil took in a breath to unleash another ember, but the Sabai rapidly tiptoed over and then jumped at her in a pounce. She cried out in pain, a scratch tore at her side. She wobbled where she stood, and the Sabai hopped right back. The gremlin Pokémon tilted its head at her. It almost seemed curious about her pain. Are you okay, Cyndaquil? She whimpered, but she still nodded in reply. Cyndaquil didn't actually have any serious wounds. Instead, she was just scared, but fighting was in a Pokémon's blood. She took another step forward and raised her head, doing her best to force through the confidence needed to face this foe. Ember! Sam shouted. The wild Sabai once again easily avoided the attack. It ran, Cyndaquil's ember following after it, but it still managed to scoop up as much of the powdered quartz as it could and dart down one of the side paths. After it! Sam shouted. Cyndaquil squeaked in alarm, but Sam was already chasing it deeper down. Sabai was a rare Pokémon. Going deeper was a risk, but it was one Sam was willing to take. Letting it escape here meant letting his one potential chance at a surefire victory slip away. Buck absolutely deserved to taste defeat. Sam wanted the man to feel emotional pain. With his longer legs, Sam could move faster than Cyndaquil, so he stopped to grab her in one arm. He held the tiny Pokémon like a football, charging forward. At the same time, he made sure his flashlight remained trained on his foe. Ember again, he shouted. In the crook of his arm, Cyndaquil opened her mouth and unleashed her attack. More flames chased after the Sabai, but it continued to run, cackling all the way. Sam shouted for Cyndaquil to attack again and again and again, but all of the attacks missed. Then, he started to notice a strange smoke. He looked down. The flames from Cyndaquil's back had set fire to his jacket's arm. Fire, he shouted in alarm. Cyndaquil used Ember again, completely missing the point. He rushed to set her down, yanked his jacket from over his head, and tossed that exterior layer to the floor. He stomped on it to put out the flames. Sam was panting, both from running and from the adrenaline of the fight. His arm tingled but was undamaged. That whole act had caused him to drop his flashlight, but he picked it up and pointed it at his jacket on the floor. A hole had been burned in the arm, but it was still mostly usable. Cyndaquil, however, refused to look him in the eye. She looked as sheepish as she could get. Ugh! This is on me, Sam groaned. Pointing his flashlight back towards the corridor, the Sabai was already gone. Not just that, he checked his backpack. It stole the bottle. It snuck up on us and took the rest of the quartz when we were asleep. Sam wanted to scream. This whole thing had been stupid. The Sabai had completely fooled them, and not just that, they had pointlessly gone deeper into the cave. Annoyed, Sam scratched at the side of his head. Cyndaquil made a questioning noise. I'll be alright. I just didn't think ghost types were as tricky as that. He shined his flashlight towards back where they came, but then Sam immediately froze. There wasn't just one tunnel behind him, but a passage of 3. Sabai had followed a twisting path deeper into the cave, and now Sam was in an unfamiliar intersection. Each and every entrance was far too similar to tell apart, and that whole moment where he had thrown off his jacket had turned him completely around. Which one did we come out of? Is it that one? Or maybe that one? He tried to sniff the air to maybe smell where a previous use of ember had hit, but the smoke from his jacket polluted the space too much. In other words, Cyndaquil, Sam said, I think we might be lost. Chapter 7. Sam was stupid. He had been a moron, and he hated that. What kind of trainer runs deeper into a cave they were unprepared for? What kind of trainer willingly chases a ghost type without any prior thought? Oh, yeah. Me. Now that the reality of the situation had fully sunken in, Sam recognized he had made several critical errors in his decision-making process. Choosing to catch a Sabai was impulsive. Entering the cave without experience was a novice's mistake. Actually chasing the Sabai? He wanted to be a ghost-type specialist, but what ghost-type specialist would fall for an obvious trick? I think the worst part about this is that I don't even know if I'm supposed to stay in one place or search for a way out. Do we try to find an exit, or are we supposed to not move and wait for a rescue party? Or, wait, is that only for if you're lost in a forest? As someone who had lived in a small, island city for most of his life, Sam lacked any applicable survival skills. At most, he only took short trips into the nearby forest, and that only happened once every few years. He knew that he was supposed to swim parallel to the shore when caught in a riptide, but that had absolutely nothing to do with being lost in the cave. What hurt him the most about this situation was that he hadn't just hurt himself. He had hurt Cyndaquil, too. I'm sorry, he mumbled, leaning back and sliding down a wall. I should have never come here. I shouldn't have gotten us lost like this. Cyndaquil walked over, illuminated by the flashlight Sam let hit the ground. She stopped a foot away from his legs, and then she continued forward. Cyndaquil pressed herself against his side and affectionately rubbed against him. Things would be all right, she was saying. They just needed to trust one another. I know. A small chuckle left Sam's lips. I shouldn't give up so soon. Looking at his Pokémon and closest friend, Cyndaquil was forcing herself to not shake. Her fur was standing on its ends, but she was standing as tall as she could to appear brave. There was something about how she was pushing past her own fear to comfort Sam that made him feel better. Her support caused a smile to grow on his face, and he shook his while taking out the potion he had bought. Cyndaquil had a red line on her side after being hit with Sabai's scratch. All right, let's think of a plan, he said, spraying Cyndaquil's side and watching the minor wound fade away. I have no clue how long we were asleep, so I have no clue how long it'll take for someone to realize we're gone. Mom is probably busy working the store, so she won't get worried until late tonight. As for her food, his stomach rumbled. It was definitely after lunch. Okay, so I don't have any food on me, which is probably a big problem. We could still wait it out anyway, or we can take escape into our own hands. He looked down at Cyndaquil, who was staring up at him with the best determined look she could muster. Sam nodded once. Take it into our own hands. Got it. Rather than immediately get up to search, Sam moved to take out the book. He hoped the new Pokédex would contain information useful in this situation. Unfortunately, there was nothing inside about survival tips, but it did help in another way. The new Pokédex was oddly specific about where Pokémon could be found, so by paging through most of the early entries, Sam was able to figure out what species were native to Granite Cave. Zubat, Machop, and Guaidud, Sam started. There's also Abra, Aaron, Sabai obviously and Maywile. There's also Hey! Makahita, too. I wonder if Buck caught his here. Sam shook his head. Now was not the time to think about that. Alright, let's consider it. Which of these species can we deal with? Abra were famously cowards, they always teleport away rather than participate in a fight. Zubat were similar in that they flew away unless encountered in a swarm. Even then, he could avoid the bat Pokémon by staying quiet and keeping his distance. And, based on what he had seen earlier, he doubted any Maywile would show up again. The species hadn't seemed too aggressive. I'm hoping that your flames can scare away any fighting type that tries to challenge us, as I doubt wild Pokémon like them would want to risk a burn, Sam said. Guaidud are mostly passive as long as I don't step on one, but I am worried about fighting any wild rock types. Aaron are sturdy enough to pose a problem, and Guaidud have a type advantage, regardless of what I said. Added to all of this, we also have Sabai, who Obviously enough, the species was troublesome. Ugh. There's so much to worry about. I don't know how Pokémon trainers do this. Well, I mean, most of them are a lot stronger than us. What sucks is that even if we stay in one place, we're still at risk of wild Pokémon ambushing us. Sam knew they had to move forward. After all, if they were likely to be caught up in a battle no matter what they did, he'd prefer to have the chance of actually finding an exit at the same time. He took one look at Cyndaquil and saw that she was back to being nervous. He did his best to give her a confident smile. No point in waiting. If we keep a positive attitude, I'm sure we can do it. He held his fist out in front of him, and Cyndaquil only hesitated for a short moment before bumping his fist right back. All right. Let's head out. And he licked his lips. Again, I'm really sorry about all of this, Cyndaquil. I promise I won't let something like this happen again. He could tell Cyndaquil knew he genuinely meant that promise with all of his heart. There were 3 potential paths to take behind them. He wanted to assume the middle path was the correct option, but when he gauged his position with the angle of the 2 other tunnels, he realized it was the least likely to be correct. Unsure which way to go, he paced for a moment before discussing it with Cyndaquil. In the end, he determined the path forward by relying on simple logic. If he took the right path, then Sam would be taking the right path. This was the equivalent of flipping a coin. Sam hadn't actually chased Sabai for that long, so thinking about it, he doubted he was that far from where he had first traveled down. One idea was to walk down the path he chose for a reasonable amount of time before turning around if he didn't recognize anything. The flaw with that plan was that he doubted he'd be able to recognize anything in the first place. This was a cave specifically, a cave worn flat through the effort of Pokémon. Any direction he went would look nearly the same. Instead, he decided to stick with the single path he chose for as long as possible, keeping Cyndaquil out of her Pokeball and nearby. Except, almost right away, he was reaffirmed that they were lost. These passages frequently met up with and intersected others. Our one saving grace is that there are multiple entrances to these caves. Even if we don't find where we came from, we might be able to find another exit. The odds are in our favor. Cyndaquil squeaked to acknowledge what he said, but Sam didn't think she sounded very confident about his words at all. They kept walking and walking and walking down the passage. Very soon, Sam saw their first sign of life. A curled up, motionless rock. A Guaidud kept utterly still, almost indistinguishable from a mundane boulder, napping without realizing either Sam or Cyndaquil were there. Sam said nothing, but he held a finger to his lips. Cyndaquil got the message and stayed silent. The pair of them snuck past on their tiptoes and didn't let up their attempts to be quiet. The next Pokémon Sam encountered after the Guaidud was a lone Zubat, but despite Cyndaquil doing her best to jump in front of him, the Pokémon didn't attack. It merely flew on by, ignoring the pair, and Sam had the bright idea to follow. He had hoped that it was heading back to the surface, but it instead flew into a decently sized, subterranean cavern. There, he brought his flashlight up to see hundreds of other Zubat roosting on the ceiling. Obviously, he stepped back and moved away as fast as he could without making any loud noise. For all his worry about the dangers of the species here, there was a surprising lack of Pokémon. He wasn't sure if it was that they weren't present, that they were hiding, or that they could be only found deeper in, but Sam and Cyndaquil did not experience any aggressive wild encounters while wandering through the cave. In the end, Sam eventually stopped, but it wasn't because he saw another Pokémon. The light of his flashlight glinted off of something on the ground, and he paused when he recognized what it was. That's some of the powdered quartz. Do you think that Sabai dropped it when it ran? He brought his flashlight up again, and a few more grains of the quartz reflected back the light. It went down an alternate, connecting tunnel, forming a followable trail. It was entirely possible this path was created when Sam chased after the Sabai when it scooped up the bait pile and ran, but Sam had his doubts. Now, I have to question this. Did Sabai really drop it, or is this just Sabai laying out a trap? On one hand, a path of sparkling powder was an easy trail to follow back to the tunnel that led up. On the other hand, Sabai did steal that bottle of powdered quartz, which meant there was the distinct possibility that this was a way the dual ghost and dark type was trying to mess with them. Sam gave both options even odds. What do you think, Cyndaquil? Do we follow or keep exploring? She squeaked, unsure. Ugh. Sam groaned. I think that we need to follow. This is the first clue we've seen so far, and I don't want to miss our chance to leave just because we're paranoid. Although, I really don't trust that Sabai. Let's stay on high alert, just in case. Cyndaquil stiffly nodded as if that were obvious. A path set, the pair of trainer and Pokémon walked forward. Sam made sure to use his flashlight to light up as much of the cave in front of him as possible. The trail wasn't a perfect line, more like occasional, small spots of powder that shone when illuminated with his flashlight. There were enough gaps in the path that Sam could not tell if it had been left intentionally or not, but then again, that Sabai had seemed maliciously clever. Why am I considering the possibility that this wild Pokémon is some kind of devious mastermind? Sam knew why. It was because the Sabai scared him. Still, he didn't want to back down, so he continued forward. Though, he was being extraordinarily cautious about it. It followed a straight line, which added credence that it had been created during the previous chase. Yet, any thoughts that this wasn't a trap all came to a halt when Sam's flashlight revealed a sudden, sharp turn. There wasn't a turn like that when running after Sabai, Sam mumbled. He could feel Cyndaquil push closer to his leg. While the trail of dust continued around the corner, Sam was pretty sure this had been intentionally set by Sabai. Still, he was morbidly curious, and he wanted to be aware of Sabai's plans so he could be prepared. One look wouldn't hurt, right? He glanced at Cyndaquil for confirmation, where she nodded to give him permission to continue forward. With that, Sam inched toward where the tunnel turned. He peeked his head around the corner and immediately froze. Aaron, not just one, but several dozen. The armored, wild Pokémon either idly ambled around or dozed off in piles on the ground. Dark stone in the walls made Sam think this tunnel opened up into some kind of iron deposit-rich room, but more importantly, this was the wild Pokémon's nest. And Sabai was right there. None of the Aaron here noticed it, but Sabai had purposely positioned itself at the very back, in a shadow. Its gemstone eyes in the flashlight as it held a claw up towards a dozing, much larger metal mass. Sam desperately shook his head no. Sabai shook its head yes. A claw struck down. A wrenching sound rang out as the move scratched against the metal armor of the wild Pokémon. Sam yanked his head back as Sabai disappeared into a shadow. Several of the wild Aaron made noises of alarm while an unhappy rumbling shook the cave. He took a single look at Cyndaquil. "Run," he whispered. Footsteps. Many of them. The tiny Aaron were rushing out of their nest to charge at apparent invaders. That Sabai had perfectly primed this trap. While all Sam wanted to do was be prepared, the wild Pokémon had expected Sam to run away immediately and readied itself accordingly. "I hate this. I'm sorry. It wasn't us that disturbed your nest. There was a Sabai. It was the one who attacked." Sam shouted at the flood of steel-type Pokémon rushing into the tunnel behind him. Sam was faster than the herd, but he wasn't sure how long he would be able to run while holding Cyndaquil. "Screw it. Cyndaquil, use Ember." Her back burst into flame as several globs of flames shot forward at the incoming Pokémon. Aaron weren't especially weak to the fire type, but the attack was threatening enough that the stampede did skid to a halt. A sea of blue eyes stared at Sam and Cyndaquil as they stood off, threatening further attacks. "Good. Now, listen to me," Sam said, projecting confidence despite the sheer terror coursing through his veins. "We did not attack you. There was a Sabai. It led us here, and..." Sam could barely maintain his balance. The cavern around him shook, and Cyndaquil squeaked in alarm. Turning around, he saw a wall collapse downwards as rubble fell to the tunnel floor. A Laren crashed through to cut Sam off. It was a four-legged tank of iron armor, and there was the faintest of scuff marks on that armor from where the Sabai had just scratched it. Like I said, there was a Sabai. It wasn't us, we. It roared. Cyndaquil's flames went out as she shrunk from fear. The herd of Aaron behind them didn't charge forward, as now a much stronger member of their evolutionary line was going to take care of their invader for them. "It really wasn't us," Sam continued, shakily. "Please. All we want to do is leave the cave." The heavy Pokémon remained unconvinced. Angry, it took a step forward. Its blue eyes were as piercing as ever as it glared at Sam and Cyndaquil like the ants they were. "Oh. It's going to teach us a lesson." Sam wasn't sure what that might entail, but he knew that it was nothing good. Wild Pokémon tended to be more violent when their home territory was threatened, and Sam was right next to its nest. Claws dug into the floor. Another rumble left the Laren's throat. This tunnel was too tight to give Sam room to run away. He was pinned between a rock-type Pokémon and an Aaron-filled place. Yet, despite everything, Cyndaquil stepped forward even knowing the massive difference in strength. She was shaking horribly, but she seemed intent to not go out without a fight. This is awful. I'm sorry to have fallen for Sabai's trap again. A squeak from Cyndaquil admonished Sam for talking about the wrong thing. He couldn't help but to chuckle when he heard that reply. Yeah, when you're right, he said, scratching his head. We can't just sit back and let it attack us. No matter what, we still have the energy to battle. Second stage Pokémon or not, that Laren is going down. Sam wouldn't be able to win. He knew that Cyndaquil was aware of that, too. Yet, after everything they'd been through, neither of them were willing to give up without a fight. Yet, that expected fight never occurred. Thunderbolt. Sam was immediately lost in utter confusion when an extremely familiar voice rang out. It was followed by a blinding flash. The Laren groaned in pain and turned around, sparking slightly from the attack it just took. He rubbed his eyes. What he was seeing didn't change. Delcatty stood across from the Laren, boldly declaring herself its opponent and looking more confident than ever. Mom? Sam asked, absolutely bewildered. Sam's mother stood in the cave, wearing the same librarian-like outfit and green apron she always had on when managing the bookstore. Except, her hair was tied back, and her shoes had been replaced with heavy boots. A backpack likely full of supplies hung over one shoulder while she looked tired and desperate, yet there was a measure of confidence to her that only experienced trainers tended to have. Oh, not to my family, you don't, she said. Sam's mother sounded angry. She pointed forward as Delcatty knelt down to ready herself for battle. Laren cried out as stones levitated in the air and were chucked forward. Unfortunately for it, the cat moved with an agility Sam had never seen before to dodge each and every attack. How did you find us? Sam asked. Not now, honey, his mother said. We have a battle to win. The wild Laren charged, head held down to prepare what would be a devastating headbutt. His mother called out a command as it lunged towards Delcatty. Iron Tail. Delcatty's tail gained a silvery sheen. She stepped to the side to avoid the charge, and then her tail lashed out to strike a less defended point on Laren's back. Ridiculously, Laren cried out again before lunging for a metal claw. Just like before, Delcatty avoided it by leaping to the side. In fact, she constantly kept to Laren's side, leading it in some sort of dance. Metal claw after metal claw came out, but Delcatty avoided them all while repeatedly flicking Laren's side with her own reinforced tail. Now, Thunderbolt. Continue to use the move until Laren's fainted, Sam's mother said. Delcatty's fur sparked with static electricity. The move wasn't as strong as what an electric type could have done, but it was powerful enough for a special attack. The Thunderbolt left her body to course through the Laren, and absolutely nothing about its metal armor helped it resist the move. How? How is this possible? Delcatty was winning without being touched. Sam had never seen the cat move so skillfully in his life. He'd always thought she was just a house cat, a lazy feline that wanted to sleep all day. But now that he was seeing her in battle, he thought about it. Delcatty was the evolved form of Skitty. Why would such a lazy Pokémon bother to evolve? Eventually, after a full minute of this chase, the smoking form of Laren tried for one last bash, not even having enough energy to conjure up a full move. It lurched an inch forward before crumpling to the ground. Its eyes spun from the exhaustion of the battle. Laren fainted. Victorious, Delcatty proceeded to trot right up to Sam and Cyndaquil, her tail flicking back and forth in pride. Behind him, the herd of Aaron tensed out of fear. She ignored them to press against Sam's leg affectionately, where he petted her back. Hey! Static why? How did you find us? Sam said, repeating his question. Mark came to get me. You know, the Pokemart employee. Sam slowly nodded his head. He remembered how Mark had looked worried when he left. Really, what were you thinking, entering Granite Cave like this? You and Cyndaquil have no experience. This is way out of your league. Me? What about you? You run a bookstore. She moved up to Sam and crossed her arms. And what does that mean? Sam wasn't sure how to respond, but then his mother smirked. I used to be rated as a 5-star trainer. In other words, my team was equivalent to one capable of earning 5 gym badges. And Delcatty was my ace. The smug feline meowed proudly and rejoined her trainer at Sam's mother's side. Sam was left speechless, and Cyndaquil was dazed from sheer shock. "And you haven't explained how you found us," Sam mumbled. "While I might have retired, Delcatty used to work with your father when he was a Pokémon Ranger. She's used to finding lost people." The cat looked extra smug about that. Once more, Sam felt like his entire world had just been overturned. "You're grounded, by the way," his mom said. "Yeah," Sam mumbled. "And when we get home, we're going to have a serious talk." "Okay." His mother nodded her head, satisfied, but then the floor shook. Turning back to the tunnel's sudden curve, Sam watched in horror as a large, metal claw grabbed onto the edge of the wall. A head the size of his body was sleepily dragged forward. An Agron, the evolved form of Laren, made itself known. Tired, the massive Pokémon yawned, the noise shaking the cavern around them once again. It blinked to steady itself before focusing its gaze on both Sam and his mother. "Let's get out of here," Sam said hesitantly. His mother stared at the metal beast. "I agree," she said carefully. Although Agron was an incredibly powerful Pokémon, it was too big to give a proper chase. Not just that, but Delcatty and Sam's mother knew the way to get out, so within a spare few minutes, Sam was already back on the surface. There, though he would never admit to it, Sam was hit with such relief he cried. He thanked his mother. He thanked Delcatty. He thanked Cyndaquil, too. He was a novice who had entered an advanced trainer's domain, unintentionally risking it all. His plan to catch a Sabai had failed, but with new revelations, he had a feeling a lot would be changing from here on out. Chapter 8. I don't like Pokémon battles. The blunt statement cast the area around the kitchen table into silence. I don't like how they involve Pokémon getting hurt. I don't like that no matter how well trained a Pokémon is, all it takes is one error for a permanent injury. I don't like the level of strategy and counterplay forced upon everyone who wants to compete at a high level. But the biggest thing of all, Sam's mom sighed. I just don't like losing. Sam stared blankly at his mother as he sat across from her at the table. She looked more tired than ever. Cyndaquil was on her own stool, a part of this conversation, but Delcatty was sprawled out across the nearby couch, completely asleep. Honestly, the lazy cat deserved its nap. But I thought you said you were a 5-star trainer. Sam asked. I was. Years ago. It's just that I hit a wall when I tried to take on my 6th gym. You have to understand that I grew up under your grandfather, Sam. My dad told me so many stories of him succeeding at such a high level that when I failed to do the same, it hurt. She stared forward. Her gaze went briefly unfocused, as if she became lost in memory. It was only an instant, and a second later she shook her head and put her full focus back on telling her story. I didn't talk to him for a few years after that. I vanished from his life. I was too ashamed to look him in the eyes, so I went to make it on my own. I did odd jobs, did bounties, heck, I practically lived in Pokémon centers. It wasn't until I met your dad and found out that I was pregnant that I... She chuckled, slightly. In the end, my dad was just happy I came home. Sam fidgeted in his seat. He'd never been told this story by his mother. She always said that she had met his father when traveling, but he hadn't realized the extent in which she had traveled. It's because of everything I went through that I know just how completely idiotic entering that cave was of you. What possessed you to think you could take that on? Were you just trying to train? Catch a Pokémon? You and Cyndaquil have never been in a proper battle. Entering that place was like you were practically begging for. I want to go on a Pokémon journey. Sam's sudden words surprised both him and his mother. He sucked in a breath. I want to explore the world. See new places. I don't want to be trapped on this island. And I thought that if I caught a Sabai, I could not only beat Buck, but I could prove to you that I was strong and capable enough to head out on my own. His mother went quiet for a long time. Eventually, she sighed. Last time you asked was a week after Grandpa died. Yeah, Sam mumbled. His mother rubbed her head. She didn't meet Sam's eyes. Your father. After he passed, I moved here to Dewford to be closer to your grandfather and get help raising you. When you neared the age of your journey, it was his idea to give you Cyndaquil. He thought you two would be great partners. But then, his mother sighed again. He passed too, and that happened right when you were planning to leave. I said no at the time because I thought you weren't ready. I didn't want to lose you, too. Mom. Samuel, you're a smart boy, she said. You're smarter than your father when he was your age, and I'm pretty sure you'd be smarter than your grandfather, too. I know you want to be a Pokémon trainer, but I've never really given you the support you need to do that before now. I thought the battle with Buck would work that out of you, but if you entered Granite Cave, you must really want to leave Dewford, hey. Sam bit his lip. It's not just that, he said. I found a book. A book, she repeated. Slowly, Sam reached down to where his backpack was slumped against his chair, and he took out the new Pokédex. Holding it forward, he passed it to his mom. She carefully took the book and stared at its mostly featureless cover before paging through. Just like Sam had done, she skipped the foreword to reach the table of contents, and her face flashed with surprise. She flipped back to the start, and confusion settled into her expression as she read the unknown author's words. She then proceeded to skim through all of the entries, especially the later ones, in an almost identical way Sam had searched through the book only a day before. Then, she closed it and pushed it back. The silence persisted until she was able to gather the words for a reply. And you can confirm all of this? His mother asked. It has information that only the newest copy of the Pokédex has. Not just that, but I posted a new move online. Someone tested it out and it worked. It worked, Mom. Matsuba in just 2 words flashed once more in Sam's mind. It was such a short phrase, but he considered that the turning point in how he saw the book. I see, his mother said. This certainly explains a lot. Sam picked the journal back up. As he did, his mother's eyes briefly flicked to where Cyndaquil sat. So, you're not taking it away? His mother blinked. Why would I take away such a powerful resource? Because you don't want me to head out, so it's not useful for me. And with all of the unknown information in it, you can probably sell it to make back the money I'll lose against Buck. A snort. His mother forced down a laugh. Sam felt his face flush red with embarrassment, but his mother waved her hand as if to try to say she wasn't laughing at him. No, no. Sam, I'm not going to take that book from you. You aren't. With how determined you are, it's only a matter of time before you head out on your own. It's better to encourage that now, while you have the proper support. Sam's face lit up, but his expression immediately dropped when he saw his mother's stern eyes. But don't get me wrong, it's still just a book. Sure, the information in it is clearly impossible, but it's just that. Information. There's nothing in it that tells you how to battle, how to build a team, or even how to be a proper Pokémon trainer. It's only a baseline at best. What's important is to learn how to actually apply what you read and to convert that knowledge into a viable strategy. If you want to succeed, you need more than just a book. Even the smartest of people will fail to become a Pokémon trainer without the right mindset. Sam nodded fervently. His mother sighed and continued. And, to that point, you're grounded. What you did was incredibly irresponsible. Entering Granite Cave like that? You put both yourself and Cyndaquil at an extreme risk. You need to think about your choices before you go through with them. I don't want you going anywhere without my permission until you have a proper understanding of what being a Pokémon trainer entails. He continued to nod before pausing, as a few of his mother's words stood out. A proper understanding, he asked. Of course. Like I said, you're not going to learn that by reading a book. I'm talking about hands-on training, mister. Preferably by someone who has that experience. She was grinning now. His mother was downright smiling. A sudden purr came from the couch, and Sam looked over to Delcatty sitting up, grinning at him as well. Her gaze made it seem like she was looking forward to this. You're going to help me train. I'm going to make sure you'll stay safe when you go on your journey, his mother said. I'm going to make sure you don't make such an awful decision again. I have years of experience I can use to help you, and you need practical knowledge that book doesn't have. After all, you've read it more than me. Is there really anything in it that could help you survive in the wild? Sam knew the answer, there was very little. At best, it could tell him what species lived nearby. Yet, this lack of information could be solved through his mother's support. She'd beaten gyms. She'd lived on her own. If Sam was going to head out, I should have just asked. He ended up chuckling at his own stupidity. That evolved into laughter, and his mother joined in. He laughed and laughed and laughed, and out of sheer relief, he wiped the tears from his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I love you. I love you, too." He and his mother hugged. Cyndaquil hopped on the table and waddled over to join in. Then, a meow, as Delcatty demanded that she take part. Soon enough, everyone was involved. "So, training," his mother said, pulling away but leaving her hands on Sam's shoulders. "You still have to beat Buck in your match soon, right?" "Right. And I brought up Sabai because it's type." "No, Sam," his mother interrupted. "You don't need a new Pokémon to defeat him. I'm sure that with you and Cyndaquil, if you're clever enough, you'll be able to soundly win the battle on your own. He's kind of a meathead. You just need a plan." And Sam already had a plan, didn't he? He had a plan before he ever went to Granite Cave. He had just pushed it aside in favor of looking for a guaranteed win. Nothing in life was ever guaranteed, his mother said. So, over the single day left, they trained. Cyndaquil practiced following Sam's orders as he made clicking sounds with his mouth before shifting to using real words. Delcatty proved to be an incredible sparring partner to help Cyndaquil practice both her tackle and her leer. At dusk, his mother took him to the edge of town to give Sam and Cyndaquil space to see just how large of a smokescreen she could create. Then, for Ember, there were hours and hours of practice to see just how accurate she could make the attack. But, in the end, it was still only one day of training. There wasn't that much room for improvement. Instead, Sam used this time to figure out the exact limits of Cyndaquil's current capabilities, and he established his plan would work. He was confident. He was feeling good. He knew he would be able to defeat Buck. "You know, Mom was right. I don't need a Sabai. I don't need a new Pokémon. I'm fine with what I have. I just need to trust Cyndaquil, and we'll win. Buck won't even stand a chance." The morning of, Sam woke up bright and early. The sun shone through the slats of his window above him, and Cyndaquil stirred at his side. The attic was silent. Outside, there was only the faint noises of early morning chattering. Children were already laughing, and adults were already heading to work. "Good morning, Cyndaquil," Sam said. The little fire type poked her head up and smiled at him. He pushed out of bed, both yawning and stretching, and quickly, Sam threw on his clothes. Climbing downstairs, his mother had already made breakfast. Despite the big day ahead of him, Sam didn't feel nervous. He felt relaxed. Just before noon, he left the bookstore. His mother stayed behind, and in a way, that filled him with confidence. Sure, she could have gone for support, but by staying here, it was her way of saying she trusted him to be on his own and still win. But Sam wasn't alone. Cyndaquil was with him. She sat in his hood as the door to the bookstore chimed when he left. Together, the pair of Pokémon and trainer proudly marched the few blocks it would take them to reach the Pokémon Center. There, an empty battlefield awaited them with a small stand containing a handful of people. Sam paid the unexpected crowd no mind and put his full focus on the person already waiting for him. Buck. The gym trainer was in the middle of stretching, already glistening with sweat. When he saw Sam approach, he stopped. Buck grinned, almost mockingly, and Sam knew now more than ever that there was no way he'd let himself lose this fight. Chapter 9. Ah, there we go. Looks like the kid is finally here. Buck shook his arms to get off his sweat. A few pokeballs were magnetically attached to a belt around his waist, ready to be pulled off and thrown forward at a moment's notice. Makahita was likely inside one of those balls, as Buck had no Pokémon at his side. That stood counter to how Sam almost always had Cyndaquil out. She did have her own Pokeball, she just preferred not to spend too long inside of it. "I don't know what you mean by finally," Sam said, annoyed. "You said our match is at noon. It's before noon. I'm early." Sam sent a side eye to the crowd sitting on the sidelines. He hadn't expected any observers outside of random people who happened to be nearby. These people looked like they intended to be here, however. Buck must have talked. "You don't mind, right?" Buck said, completely brushing over Sam's previous statement when he noticed Sam stare at the crowd. "Had a lot of errands to run these past few days. Got up to a lot of talking. A rumor or two might have spread around. They're here to see our fight." Sam couldn't stop himself from scowling, which probably didn't align him well with the crowd. He could see that the Pokemart worker, Mark, was here. A few of his neighbors were present. There were other shopkeepers, too. Blending in with the rest, there was also a shorter, unfamiliar man with spiky blue hair. Let's get this battle over with. You've brought these people here just to embarrass yourself, Sam said. Buck opened his mouth and let loose a loud laugh. A few people in the crowd laughed as well. Big words for such a small boy. Fine, then. Let's have our match. Sam sent the man a stiff glare and moved to one side of this outdoor battlefield. Buck did the same, and Sam used this moment to look over the area. Pokémon fields mostly followed the same shape, large rectangles painted to be divided in half. Small squares were positioned on each end for the Pokémon trainers to stand. Neither trainer was allowed to leave their box. As for the Pokémon, they had to stay inside the bounds of the field for their battle. Stepping outside was usually impossible in official matches thanks to Pokémon maintain psychic barriers, but in a casual setting like this, those lines mostly just served as a general guide. Are you ready, Cyndaquil? Sam whispered, glancing at Buck as he did. Buck was just grinning. Waiting. Notably, most battles had referees, but for all the grandstanding the man had done, this battle wasn't official enough to warrant one being around. In response to Sam's question, Cyndaquil squeaked and climbed out of his hood. Her movements were stiff thanks to nerves, but she was at least not shaking. Sam could tell the crowd was getting to her with how she kept sending glances to them, yet she also was doing her best to stay focused on Buck as much as she could. She'll feel better once the match actually starts. Come on out, Makahita! Buck shouted. He tossed forward a Pokeball, which opened up and sent out a stream of light. That light coalesced into the pudgy yet muscular Pokémon that was Makahita. To announce its appearance, it lifted up a single leg to unleash a stomp befitting a sumo wrestler. No special rules for this, just the same ones for a casual battle. Buck then gained a look of fake shock, covering an open mouth with his hand. Oh. Sorry, I totally forgot you haven't been in a Pokémon battle before. Need the rules explained? Sam groaned. Really? It's like you're obsessed with bullying a 14-year-old or something. Buck's grin slackened at that, and a few members of the audience chuckled at the taunt. That seemed to bother him the most, as he proceeded to rush through his role of explaining the rules. Don't attack a fainted Pokémon. No moves aimed towards anyone watching. You can't use items unless agreed upon beforehand. And for this battle, only use the Pokémon we already have on us. Fine. For some reason, Sam's response made the man's amused look return. We'll start on the count of 3, Buck said. 1, 2, 3. Both Sam and Buck immediately pointed forward, each of them striking a dramatic pose like the trainers on television always did. In Buck's case, the pose came as part of his showboating. In Sam's case, he did it for 2 reasons, firstly to force himself into the trainer mindset, and secondly, because it felt right. Cyndaquil, remember the plan. Run away and use Ember. Arm thrust. Before either Pokémon could move, the difference in trainer experience was made clear. Buck's quick shout meant Makahita sprung into action, whereas Cyndaquil waited for Sam to explain the plan. The fighting type wasn't very fast. It was a Pokémon built for bulk and weight. Short legs rapidly pushed against the ground to move it forward, and it readied its punches by holding its naturally gloved fists close to its chest. For Cyndaquil, however, even with that delay, she was still able to run. Makahita managed to reduce the distance between them with its initial lurch forward, but Cyndaquil's body was much more suited to scurrying around. She ran a bit, stopped, then turned and aimed her head. Flames flicked off her back as she opened her mouth. Several globs of ember fanned out in a spray. Makahita sidestepped most of them, ignoring the few that hit its side. While it wasn't fast, its movements came out well controlled. Seeing that, Cyndaquil hurriedly stopped her attack since Makahita was using this moment where she wasn't running to rapidly approach. Now! Buck shouted. The fighting type lunged, and Cyndaquil wasn't ready to continue her dash. A fist struck her side, then another. Thankfully, arm thrust traded power for speed, so Cyndaquil managed to scramble away and flee after suffering only 2 hits of that attack. Keep running, Sam said. He was already grimacing. One day of training really wasn't enough. You know, if all you're going to do is run away, we can make use of that, too. Buck taunted. Makahita, focus energy. Go for an ember now. Makahita brought its arms close to its body and hunkered down. Its eyes were thin enough to always look closed, but it was clear it had turned all of its attention inward to center its internal energy. Cyndaquil, as her opponent had stopped, paused her dash around the field to aim another use of Ember. Many of her sparks went wide, missing the immobile Makahita, but enough of them hit that scorch marks appeared on Makahita's yellow skin. Come on! The Ember continued, and then Makahita snapped its eyes open. Its gaze was entirely focused on Cyndaquil, but her flames continued to blaze as she continued to attack. Keep going! Sam shouted. Buck looked amused at Sam's poor attempt to deal damage. Charge forward! Grab it for vital throw! Makahita charged as commanded. Cyndaquil didn't move, maintaining her current attack. Sam felt his fists clench by his sides as the distance between them narrowed. By saying nothing, he was essentially ordering her to take this hit. Flames scorched Makahita's chest as it rushed closer. Within a second, it was on her, and it lunged forward to grab her front paws. Ember concluded with a yelp as Makahita yanked Cyndaquil off the ground. The yellow Pokémon began to spin, building momentum, then it released it all to send Cyndaquil away in a painful throw. She cried out, yet when Makahita had thrown her, it had winced. It took all of Sam's efforts to not jump in the air in a cheer. He still cried out, though. He couldn't resist at least some celebration. You did it! Makahita is burned. Once again, Makahita winced. It clenched its jaw as the scorch marks on its body caused continuing pain. It wasn't exactly a flame, instead, the heat from its wounds dug into it to have it suffer from damage over time. Ember inflicted the exact status condition Sam wanted. You know, kid, that's pretty clever of you. How'd you know Makahita didn't have guts? Sam smiled. Guts normally boosted a Pokémon's physical power when fueled by the adrenaline of a status effect like a burn, but such a thing didn't happen here. Instead, the burn hindered Makahita, the stress of the pain made it difficult to land full-powered attacks. It was obvious. Of course your Makahita doesn't have guts. Most abilities require training to be used in battle, and your Pokémon hasn't been with you for that long. Sam mimicked Buck's previous, mocking grin. He received a frown in return. Although, I really had no way of knowing. My logic holds, but this was really all just a bet. Either Makahita was burned and that lowered its attack, or Makahita was burned and it became that much stronger thanks to guts. For Sam's purposes, it didn't matter. Cyndaquil would still need to run away no matter what, and the burn would still slowly damage Makahita regardless of any harmful or beneficial effects. Now, run away! Sam shouted at the top of his lungs. Get ready for a smokescreen. Grab it. Hold it down and pin it and beat it till it faints. Buck was downright scowling. Sam smiled, but his attention remained firmly locked on the field. Keep going. Like before, Cyndaquil proved she was faster. She kept to the edge of the painted boundary as Makahita gave chase, but it genuinely could not keep up. Flames sparked off her back as she prepared herself to use her next move as soon as possible. This isn't a battle. All you're doing is running away. Buck yelled. It's called strategy, Sam said. It's called cowardice. Buck countered. Makahita, time to change things up. Sand attack, get it in its eyes. Where Makahita was once giving chase, it stopped and used its momentum to dig its feet into the ground. The skid kicked up dirt which then sailed over the battlefield right towards Cyndaquil. The dirt wasn't sand, but it was still a cloud of irritating grains that coated her face and entered her eyes. She cried out and squinted. Already, Sam could see tears forming as her vision became unreliable. Now, Cyndaquil wouldn't be able to run away. Sure, she might have still had the speed advantage, but she wouldn't know where to run thanks to her greatly reduced sight. Thankfully, at this point, Cyndaquil was finally ready to follow his command. Smokescreen, Sam said. Repeating the move's name encouraged Cyndaquil to go ahead and release it, as a cloud of thick, black smoke left her mouth to coat a good third of the field. Sand attack might have temporarily blinded Cyndaquil, but this move meant Makahita wouldn't be able to rely on sight as well. Both Pokémon were now invisible to their targets, and with Makahita being worn down by its burn, the match was firmly in Sam's favor. Quiet. Listen to your surroundings. Locate it through any noise it makes, Buck said. Cyndaquil. Stay still and don't make any noise. Sam shouted. The thickness of the cloud meant he could only barely make out Buck's face. The man looked rather annoyed that Sam had immediately given orders that stood counter to his own. The field went silent. Smoke continued to drift through the air. It lingered above the battlefield, taking longer to dissipate than non-Pokémon-based smoke. Sam found himself clenching his jaw as his entire attention was locked onto the darkness. "You can do it, Cyndaquil. I know you can." There was no movement, no sound, and no signs of battle for what felt like minutes. The audience was perfectly silent. Makahita hunted for Cyndaquil in the continuing smoke. Yet, a Pokémon did eventually cry out. It wasn't the Pokémon Sam would have liked to hear. "Quill." Just like that, Sam's heart sank. He watched as Cyndaquil was tossed directly out of her cover. The vital throw caused her to sail through the air and hit the ground hard. After rolling over the dirt, she shook and barely managed to push herself up. She breathed heavily. The only reason the move hadn't fainted her outright was that the burn had weakened this damage. "How are you doing, Cyndaquil? Can you hold on?" Sam asked. She was too tired to make any noise, but she still nodded her head. He gripped his hands and stared forward. From the smoke, Makahita strode out. After all that time Cyndaquil had delayed, Makahita was now in bad shape. It was breathing just as heavily as Cyndaquil, and it winced with every small move. The burn on its body looked even worse than before. Likely, the heated smoke had negatively affected it. The Pokémon stood there, panting, as it glared at Cyndaquil where she stood. New vital throw would work. "The move always hits," Buck mumbled. "All right, Makahita. Finish off the match. Go ahead and use arm thrust." The Pokémon proceeded forward. Sam bit his tongue. Cyndaquil was far too exhausted to use any new moves. Yet Makahita didn't run, it walked. It was just as tired as her. The fighting type doggedly moved across the entire field, where it stopped only a foot away. Neither Pokémon immediately acted, instead glaring at one another in silence. Then, a smirk from Makahita. Cyndaquil smirked right back. Only a second later, it fell. Cyndaquil hadn't needed to use her own power. A burn would harm a foe no matter the difference in strength. The pain it caused had slowly eaten away at Makahita's energy until it finally caused it to collapse. "We won," Sam said quietly. We won, Cyndaquil. We won." He laughed madly and threw out his hands. A minor applause came from this battle's small audience. Relief filled Sam's chest. "Not yet, you haven't," Buck said, snarling. "Makahita, return. Medicham, come out." To both Sam's utter dismay and complete confusion, Buck returned his fainted Pokémon and replaced it with a brand new individual. This one was lean with incredibly thick legs. Its eyes had the focus of a Pokémon that had seen hundreds of battles, and it pressed its two hands together almost in prayer. "But, we agreed to have our fight between Makahita and Cyndaquil," Sam asked. "Did we? Because if you think back to when I was stating the rules earlier, I specifically said that we'd use the Pokémon we had on us. Hence, Medicham." Buck's grin was in no way friendly. A few of the observers threw boos his way. "Oh, quiet you. You don't realize how much money is riding on this battle," he said. "Medicham, it isn't moving. Go for a high jump kick." "Don't. We forfeit." Buck made no efforts to call his Pokémon back. Sam wasn't a fool, he could recognize a losing battle when he saw one. Cyndaquil had already exhausted herself against Makahita. A veteran Medicham like this would absolutely defeat her. He tried to pull Cyndaquil's Pokeball from his pocket. Yet, in his panic, he fumbled. "I need one of those fast-to-use belts." Medicham loyally jumped into the air, and Sam moved without thinking. As a leg extended downwards, he charged. "Stop!" In an instant, Sam was on top of his Pokémon, clutching her tightly to his chest in a way to protect her from the incoming attack. Rushing onto the field like this would spell an immediate loss. It was a manual forfeit. To Buck, the battle was still on. But to Sam, he knew it had ended when Makahita collapsed. Cyndaquil whined, and Sam clenched his eyes shut. He braced himself to provide her with as much protection from this attack that he could. The world was darkness with his closed eyes. Out of fear, he was temporarily deaf. He waited for the impact to come, but it never did. "Yeah, all right. This match is over," someone new called out. Sam's tension turned to confusion when he heard that unfamiliar voice. Peeking open an eye, he saw someone standing over him. The man had spiky blue hair and had been in the audience only a moment prior. "You. There was something about him Sam thought he recognized, but he wasn't sure who this guy was until he spoke next. Sorry about all of this, the man said, grinning. We're still getting our gym in order. What kind of a gym leader would I be if I let one of my own gym trainers attack a newbie like that? Despite everything that had just happened, this newcomer's smile was practically infectious. Sam pulled himself off of Cyndaquil, sitting up, and he looked around. Somehow, Buck's Medicham was now lying on its back, groaning. Nearby, a massive Pokémon stood in front of Sam as if to protect him. Hands as wide as a grown man's chest were held out like walls, as the evolved form of Makahita, Hariyama, patiently waited for its trainer's next command. You're Brawly, the apparent gym leader said. There was going to be a big ceremony introducing me to Dewford soon, but I guess this will do. He was young, likely barely within his 20s, yet he stood with the intense focus that only the elite ever had. After all, gym leaders weren't just strong trainers. They were people that stood at the peak of their class, hand-chosen by the Pokémon League to both protect their local area while also serving as the final boss of their gym's challenge. So, Buck, Brawly said, terrifyingly casual. Wanna explain why you've been so eager to help out with all our business deals? Buck's face drained of blood. He looked like he was about to cry as Brawly cracked the knuckles of his hands. Go heal your Cyndaquil, Brawly said. In the meantime, I'll take care of Buck. I think it's about time he learns that it's wrong to abuse power. Brawly looked just as malicious as Buck had been only a few moments prior, yet Sam didn't wait. Cyndaquil was staring at the enormous Hariyama next to her in awe, but Sam scooped her up anyway and rushed into the nearby Pokémon Center, where she would hopefully be treated after that match. Sam stood at the front counter of the Pokémon Center. Technically, there was a small fee for anyone who received healing who wasn't a registered Pokémon trainer, but Sam had been a registered Pokémon trainer ever since Cyndaquil first joined him. He just hadn't signed up to compete in any Pokémon League. Although, he would need to register again when his journey actually started. Still, there was a cost to this, and that cost was getting yelled at. I mean, really, carrying your Pokémon like that? Pokeballs exist for a reason. Next time your Pokémon is hurt, return them so that the passive stasis of their Pokeball prevents them from getting worse. Why yes, Nurse Joy. Sam was quick to salute. The pink-haired nurse huffed and leaned back, a satisfied look on her face. After a few moments of staring at the terrified Sam, she let out a sigh and handed over a Pokeball. Cyndaquil will be fine. She just needs rest. No training or Pokémon battles for the rest of the day. She really pushed herself in your match, do you understand me? Sam nodded the best he could. The nurse gave him a small smile. Go, she said. I believe you have some people waiting for you, yes. When he turned, he saw not just Brawly standing off to the side, but his mother was here, too. Yo. Brawly brought up a hand and smiled cheerfully as Sam approached. Just talking to your mom, little dude. Far as I'm concerned, the Pokédex deal is still on. But Buck thought he could manipulate things so he could pocket any extra funds for himself. Yes, we might be getting some electronic Pokédexes, but they're expensive and are primarily a research tool for the professors. We don't have enough to cover every gym trainer in the gym. Sam couldn't help but to feel practically all of the tension in his body drain away. He had needed to win the battle to ensure the deal would go through. Now, he had won, and any issues Buck might have caused had vanished just like that. Although, next year, we'll probably cut back on the amount we're ordering, Brawly said. While electronic Pokédexes might be expensive now, the professors are hard at work ensuring they'll be more affordable in the future. Sam wanted to cry out about how unfair that was, but his mom immediately waved off those concerns. That's fine. As long as you give us a heads up. Then consider this your 1-year warning, Brawly said in an almost playful voice. Sam really hated the way Brawly had just made his mother laugh. Oh. I almost forgot, said his mother a second later. Congratulations. Out of nowhere, Sam was pulled into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you. You won your battle. You were right. It's risky. If Brawly wasn't there. She pulled out to better look Sam in the eye. He was, and that's what matters. In the future, if you don't want to be bullied by the strong. Then I should get strong, myself, Sam finished. His mother smiled proudly and rubbed his shoulder. When she stepped away from Sam, he sighed, a little embarrassed. But that was a great battle, though. Brawly said, butting in. Really handled yourself well against Buck. That strategy? Impressive for a new trainer. Really? The gym leader winced. I mean, kind of. Not too many trainers at your level think to try for status moves, but simply putting a status on someone and running away won't be enough against a stronger opponent. Oh. At least I know there's room for improvement. Yet, despite how Brawly had put down Sam's strategy, the man still looked cheerful, and he leaned in to get a bit closer. Now, the real reason I wanted to bring that up is because I have advice for you. You want to be a Pokémon trainer, yet. I do. A ghost-type specialist. The best there ever was. The man grinned. All right. So, listen. Hone is great and all, but if you really want to challenge yourself, I have a different place in mind. You know Johto. Sam blinked. But you work for Hone? Why recommend somewhere else? Well, I'm not technically a gym leader here just yet, not until my first season starts in 2 months. Johto, though? I trained there, under a man named Chuck. I can personally attest to the strength of the region's gym leaders, and their league season starts in just a handful of weeks, sooner than ours. If you want to face tough opponents, encounter unfamiliar Pokémon, and really push yourself, I can't recommend Johto enough. Sam looked to his mother. She was smiling without even an ounce of worry. Calmly, she nodded her head. I support your decision, whatever you choose, she said. Sam stepped back away from Brawly and looked the gym leader in his eyes. I'll go. I'll follow your advice and head to Johto. Great. Brawly merrily slapped Sam on the shoulder and took a step back. Now excuse me, I have an employee to fire. And then he cheerfully walked straight out. Then it was just Sam and his mother. Delcatty was still at home, and Cyndaquil was in her Pokeball. The layout of the Pokémon Center meant there were couched sitting areas for trainers to wait while their Pokémon were being healed. Taking the chance, he and his mom moved over to one to have a private talk. Sam. Brawly is right. We talked about this. I want to go on my journey. She took in a shaky breath. I understand. Holding you back would have never worked. I'll support you, his mother said. But, Sam paused, weighing his own words. I'm not a strong trainer. Not yet, at least. Cyndaquil and I still have a lot of ways we can grow. You said you would help me, right? Her eyes were wet, but there was a proud gleam to them, too. Of course, she said, wiping away her tears. Sam immediately embraced his mother, pulling her into a hug. He was squeezed back in return. A second later, Cyndaquil made sure to release herself from her Pokeball to join in as well. Besides, you said I was grounded, remember? Sam asked. His mother laughed. For the rest of the month, she said. I imagine you'll be heading out after. Yet. But before then, we still have all that time to spend together. He smiled, and his mother smiled back. Sam didn't go to bed right away that night. The thoughts of foreign regions and difficult challenges filled his mind. Instead, he turned to the best resource he had at his disposal, the new Pokédex. He wanted to see everything Johto had to offer. Opening it up, he parsed through it, looking at all of its entries. Pokémon not native to Hone filled the pages in front of him, but when he turned to one specific page, he froze. A desk light illuminated the text. The entry listed moves, abilities, approximate stats, and even the immense rarity the Pokémon had. Yet, none of that was what stood out. Instead, it was the name of the species, its type, and the drawing that came with it that utterly consumed his focus. Cyndaquil was unable to look away, too. I can't believe it, Sam whispered. According to this book, you have an alternative final evolution. He turned to look at his Pokémon. Cyndaquil turned to look at her trainer. It was last sighted over 100 years ago, but evolving into one should still be possible. What stands out to me the most? Sam swallowed. His throat felt dry. The thing about Hisuian Typhlosion is that it's part ghost type. Somehow. Cyndaquil, if we can figure out how to evolve into this, you can end up sharing a type with the rest of our future team. She looked into his eyes and nodded once. If there was ever a way to become a ghost type specialist, figuring out a long-lost evolution would be a great first step. Chapter 10. Over the next month, Sam trained. He jogged through town with Cyndaquil, not intending to build speed but to build stamina. At first, neither of them could run for longer than a few minutes at a time. But, by the end of it, if they maintained a consistent pace, both of them could reach the end of the town and come back while only being moderately out of breath. He returned to Granite Cave, and while he and Cyndaquil didn't go in, the exterior was a perfect training ground to practice moves. Through repeated attacks against the ample present boulders, Cyndaquil narrowed the width of her ember, improved tackle so it could be used alongside quick bursts of speed, and figured out how to use smokescreen much faster than before. Not just that, but Sam also worked on timing his commands. He himself got a handle on knowing exactly when and how he needed to call out to get Cyndaquil to respond. Then, against Delcatty, they sparred, though these were the only battles he and Cyndaquil fought for now. While his mother worked the shop, Delcatty brought the pair to the alley out back, and she ruthlessly led Cyndaquil in circles while demonstrating an agility that prevented all incoming attacks from landing. Yet, despite the lack of success and the exhausting battles, Cyndaquil managed to build up quite the withering leer from where she always seemed to collapse onto the ground. The new Pokédex was not left out of Sam's training, either. While nothing was immediately applicable, he made sure to learn as much from it as he could. Though, memorizing 1,000 entry-plus Pokédex within a single month was a big task. Altogether, Sam and Cyndaquil did very little that was new. Everything about their practice was about building up the basics and preparing themselves to take on the rigorous travels of a trainer's journey. Sam, while still pale from all the time he spent indoors, now at least had the slightest of tans to him. Also, somehow, Cyndaquil looked more lean and less pudgy than before. And, as Sam frequently helped out his mother as part of the punishment for entering Granite Cave, she lectured him about all of the tips, tricks, and survival skills he would need to know when it came to surviving away from home. All of this was for a single goal. Everything Sam did was to ensure he'd become the best Pokémon trainer he could be. By the end of it, he packed what he could into his backpack and set out alongside his mother and Cyndaquil. His mom used her contacts to get them a ride to Hoenn Slateport City. Now, what time was left had run out, and Sam stood at the end of the Slateport docks while his mother fawned over him as throngs of people passed them by. "You've made sure to pack a change of clothes, right?" his mom asked. "Yes, Mom." Cyndaquil's Pokeball. "Yes, Mom." The new Pokédex. Sam paused when she stated the title so bluntly and in public. Then again, its title wasn't very descriptive for what the book actually contained. "Yes, Mom," Sam answered. She smiled at him with her hands on his shoulders. It looked like she wanted to say something more, but her eyes started to tear up. "Anne," she said, voice choking up, "you're really sure you want to head out?" "I am. I will become a proper ghost-type specialist. Cyndaquil and I are going to conquer Johto," Sam said, staring unerringly forward, determination clear in his voice. For one last time, his mother looked him up and down before bringing him in for the tightest hug of his life. "I know you will, Sam," she said. "Just remember I love you." "I love you too, Mom." She did the same thing to Cyndaquil, who was riding in Sam's hood like always. The little fire type squeaked and saluted when his mother told her to keep everyone safe. Then, Sam ascended the staircase that led up to the cruise ship heading to Johto Olivine City, specifically, and he and Cyndaquil waved goodbye to his mother until she was nothing more than a speck on the horizon. He stood silent for a long while as all the ship passengers around filed inside. They returned to their rooms, but Sam stared out into the ocean and the rapidly fading landmass on the horizon. His heart pounded in his chest. He could already feel his blood racing. With this boat's departure from Hoenn, Sam's journey had properly begun. "Let's explore the ship, Cyndaquil," he said. He turned around and took the first step of his new life as a Pokémon trainer. The SS Sagittarius was a cruise liner, but not in the classic sense. It transported thousands of people at once, but it lacked the high-end, luxury features most cruise ships boasted. Instead, it sailed from Johto, to Sinnoh, to Kanto, to Hoenn, and then finally back to Johto for one purpose and one purpose only, collecting and transporting trainers that wanted to see the world. It was more like a floating hotel than anything else, but it had the amenities needed to attract trainers of all forms. Battlefields, training grounds, an in-ship Pokémon Center, and even trading machines. This was the perfect place to begin a journey as everything and everyone here was all about Pokémon battles. Sam moved through upper walkways and looked around in awe. Rooms surrounded him in stacks that overlooked an interior, open space filled with trainers. He found his own reserved room quickly enough and deposited everything but Cyndaquil's Pokeball and the new Pokédex. The only reason Sam had been able to board was due to his mother buying him a ticket from the profit of the Pokédex sale. He didn't want even a single cent of that to go to waste. He ran downstairs, moving so fast that Cyndaquil bounced in his hood. He descended level after level to reach the lowest deck, where the ship's battlefields had been set up. They weren't as large as official battlefields, but there were many of them lined up in a row. Already, trainers participated in battles while others stood off to the side, watching the matches, mingling with one another, and waiting for their own turn. There has to be at least 50, no, at least 100 people here, Sam said to Cyndaquil. Actually, I think there might be more. In a town as small as Dewford, gatherings as large as this were practically unheard of. There were just that many trainers here. Not just that, but alongside those trainers were Pokémon. Plunging into the depths of this crowd, Sam pulled out the new Pokédex and began to look through it to identify what he saw. A Beedrill stabbed its arms towards a Pidgeotto that ducked and weaved between its attacks. A craggy Geodude tore chunks of dirt out of the field to toss them at a yellow sheep, a Mariup, that buzzed with sparks. At the furthest end, a battle took place that far surpassed the rest. A bright orange Charizard released an onslaught of flame against a stout Vileplume. The grass type was trying its best to resist the fire, but the super effective attack was slowly wearing it down. At the side of that field, an Alakazam was locked in intense concentration to maintain a protective psychic barrier around it. Sam could see how the flames of Charizard's attack spread out and licked up the sides, unable to reach the audience thanks to Alakazam's efforts. That's, Sam shook his head, realizing that he had stopped walking, absolutely enthralled. Cyndaquil, that's going to be us one day. He heard a soft squeak from behind his ear. Cyndaquil was just as lost in her observations as Sam was. Before that, though, we should probably find someone to battle. In a place like this, Sam would be an absolute fool to not fight someone in a match. He had a full month of training that he wanted to put to use against another trainer. Sure, Cyndaquil might not have learned any new moves, but her baseline had increased so dramatically that Sam had absolute confidence in his Pokémon. He rushed over to where a ship employee managed one of the fields and signed himself up to reserve a slot for a battle. He had no opponent set, so he would be skipped over if he didn't find one. At least, Sam was now guaranteed to have the chance if he managed to get an opponent. So, he began to run through the crowd. Hey, do you want to battle? Sam stopped in front of one trainer holding an Oddish in her arms. She turned and smiled at him, but that smile fell when her eyes locked onto Cyndaquil behind his head. Yeah, right. You'd crush us way too easily with your fire type. The response was disappointing, but he moved away and found someone else soon after. You want to battle my Seal, the trainer said. You know that Seal is a water type though, right? Yeah. Type advantage or not, I want to have a battle. Sam replied. The Pokémon trainer in front of him gained a funny look before shaking their head and walking away. Someone else, then. Finding potential opponents was a little difficult, because Sam had to find people with Pokémon around the same level as Cyndaquil. Despite the sheer number of trainers here, it was hard to simply eyeball the relative strength of the people he saw. Too strong, and they'd decline a pointless match. Too weak, and they wouldn't want to risk it against Cyndaquil. Yet, when Sam did find trainers he thought were at his level, they always seemed to find some sort of excuse after taking a single look at Cyndaquil. Did I read the room wrong? He quietly asked his Pokémon. She mumbled something, but Cyndaquil was just as confused as he was. It's likely because your Pokémon is a starter Pokémon, a voice from behind Sam said. I don't think you realize how intimidating it is to be approached so suddenly by a trainer who has one. Sam stopped where he was sulking and turned to whoever had just spoken to him. Approaching him was a boy maybe a year or two older with brown hair smoothed back against his head. Starter Pokémon? Sam asked. Why would that make a difference? Starter Pokémon make all the difference. If not in their potential power, then in their relative rarity, the boy explained, straightening out the sleeves of his suit coat. Each region has a trio of Pokémon specially bred to be given out as starters primarily to those that either test into it or who are handpicked by regional professors. With your approach being so excitable, and with your Cyndaquil in your hood, they all think I'm some kind of low-level, pseudo-elite. Sam concluded. The boy raised one of his eyebrows. I wouldn't have phrased it exactly like that, but yes, you have the gist of it. Sam rubbed the side of his head, a little embarrassed at how he had missed that connection, himself. Xavier, the boy said, introducing himself while holding out a hand. Sam replied, taking the offered hand and shaking it. Thanks for the information. It's a little annoying because I didn't meet Cyndaquil through any of that. We only met because of my grandfather. Is your grandfather a professor? Xavier asked. No, but I'm pretty sure his Typhlosion is currently living with one of those specialty breeders you mentioned, Sam replied. Xavier hummed and looked over Sam, seemingly taking him in. Sam watched as the boy's eyes darted to his lack of Pokeball belt, the aged tome in his hands, and then to Cyndaquil in his hood. You know, Xavier said, I wouldn't mind testing the apparent power of a starter Pokémon, myself. Sam grinned. Great. I already have a battlefield reserved, so if you want to head out. That would be fine, Xavier said with a polite smile. He and Sam walked over to the side of the soon-to-be-his field. Sam went on to try to talk to Xavier, asking the boy about his own background. Yet, any attempts to make small talk was rebuffed with either silence or a one-word answer. Quickly realizing Xavier wasn't here to make friends, Sam went silent. If he just wants a battle, I guess that works too. On the field itself, two identical Magnemite battled it out in a species-based grudge match. Their metallic bodies released shock after shock until one eventually fell, and it was Sam's turn to go up. Next up, we have Sam. An employee of the ship called out. You're up. The field's manager waved over Sam and Xavier as they stepped onto the field. No high-level moves like Hydro Pump or Fire Blast are allowed, the ship employee said to them. Anything else that risks affecting the ship is not allowed, either. Under no circumstances are you allowed to use Earthquake. Again, do not use Earthquake. We're on a ship, people. Use common sense. The man sighed, as if tired. Sam couldn't help but to feel embarrassed on behalf of whoever thought it would be smart to use an earth-shaking attack like that on a floating boat. But, it wasn't like Sam had any of those high-level moves at his disposal. He and Cyndaquil were just beginners and were incapable of using anything that strong. For now, he thought to himself. Other than your Cyndaquil, how many Pokémon do you have? Xavier asked. Just the one, Sam replied. Of course, Xavier mumbled under his breath. Well then, I will use only one of mine. I wish you luck in our battle. You'll need it. The two of them split off, moving to their respective trainer boxes on the sides of the field. Xavier sent a respectful nod to the ship employee while Sam waved to signify he was ready. The employee nodded back to acknowledge the signals before holding out both arms in a mimicry of an official referee's flags. He then brought them down and called for the two trainers to send out their Pokémon. Cyndaquil. I choose you. Despite yelling what he always saw on TV, Sam still felt the heat in his face when he shouted such a cheesy line. Cyndaquil squirmed out of his hood and pushed off his shoulder to jump onto the field. Once she landed, she let the flames on her back flare up. Xavier, however, had a much more basic entrance for his Pokémon. He merely reached into his jacket's front pocket and pulled out a certain, black and gold Pokeball, a luxury ball. Those were significantly more expensive but were significantly more comfortable for a Pokémon in exchange. Yanma, Xavier said calmly, releasing a 3-foot-long, red dragonfly. Nice. If it's a bug type, we'll have the advantage. Begin, the referee shouted a second later. Sam was ready for this. He spent almost a full month preparing for battle, and this would be his and Cyndaquil's first match away from home. His blood raced, and his grin widened. He pointed forward, shouting a command in the very same instant Xavier shouted his own. Ember. Sonic boom. Each combatant exploded into action, but in very different ways. Cyndaquil's flames burst to life at a rate she could not achieve before, and sparks of fire shot out of her mouth in a steady stream. As for Yanma, the bug Pokémon darted side to side, using the immense speed and agility its wings granted it in the air. Ember chased after it, and even with all its efforts to dodge, Yanma failed to prevent the attack from clipping it in the side and leaving blackened scorch marks on its red carapace. Yes! Sam shouted. This was a huge improvement over Cyndaquil's wide sprays from before. However, the battle wasn't won just yet. Still going, the Yanma zipped forward. Quickly, the bug type raced through the air, pushing past any pain and building up speed to close in onto Cyndaquil. She squeaked in alarm as Yanma forced its wings to flap at an incredible pace and convert its momentum into a blast of air that hit her head on. Sonic Boom might have been a normal type move, but it was an extremely consistent attack that packed quite the punch in a low-level fight like this. Again, Yanma, Xavier said. Sam bit his lip in thought as Cyndaquil heaved herself back up. See if you can get it to waver with Leer, he said, taking advantage of a brief delay as Yanma turned around. Use Ember after. Yanma built distance between them once more to repeat the same, bombing run-like dive it had used last time. Cyndaquil braced herself, and when the bug type neared, she glared at it with a sudden, spine-chilling leer. All of her practice sending Delcatty harsh looks paid off as Yanma wavered in the air, its eyes widening underneath their compound lenses. Go! Sam shouted. A second sonic boom screeched towards Cyndaquil right when she unleashed her own ember. The two attacks hit their targets. Cyndaquil was too slow to dodge out of the way, and Leer had made it so Yanma wasn't prepared to dodge. The bug type crashed into the ground, the heat of the fire type moves getting to it. As for Cyndaquil, the sonic boom blasted her back. She didn't have the defenses to resist. Both Pokémon groaned and tried to get back up, but in the end, neither of them managed to push off the ground. Two back-to-back fire-type moves were too much for Yanma, and the two sonic booms were similarly too much for Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil is unable to battle. Yanma is unable to battle, the referee called out. The outcome is a tie. It wasn't a win, but Sam couldn't stop grinning. Sure, the sonic boom had knocked Cyndaquil out, but what a match. Quick battles were expected at low levels, so he didn't even blink at how little time it took. Instead, he was just proud that Cyndaquil knocked out her foe. He was also more than satisfied with the results as the match helped him narrow down what needed to improve. Namely, while Cyndaquil had a decent offense, he needed to help her with her agility and the ease at which she could dodge attacks. Cyndaquil. You were amazing. Sam rushed forward to kneel on the ground and scoop Cyndaquil up into his arms. Perfect use of Leer and Ember. How are you feeling? Cyndaquil stirred and shook herself to better come to. Fainting in Pokémon battles didn't always mean true unconsciousness. A lot of times, battles simply went until one side was genuinely unable to continue or until a Pokémon had run out of internal energy, which taking attacks tended to drain. Your thoughts? He asked, repeating a similar question. She slumped, disappointed, but Sam smiled and shook his head. No. Your Ember was way better aimed since our match against Buck, and your Leer paved the way for a perfect, second hit. We might not have won, but we still tied. A success in our first true battle. Cyndaquil looked to be considering Sam's words, and he knew she'd feel better soon. He turned his gaze up to thank Xavier for a great match, but when he looked at the boy, Xavier was frowning, obviously disappointed. That's all the power a starter Pokémon has to offer? Xavier asked. You lost to a bug type. We didn't lose. We tied. There's a difference, Sam said. Cyndaquil and I have only been training for a month, anyway. We've basically spent the past few years of our life being lazy and growing fat. Cyndaquil snorted, somewhat offended. That's no excuse, Xavier continued. If you didn't win, you've lost. If you want to be a Pokémon trainer, you should put in more effort. Sam frowned. You sure about that? He asked cautiously. Xavier didn't respond right away. Instead, he returned Yanma to its luxury ball as he was no longer occupied with silently observing Sam. His frown deepened as he placed the ball back inside the pocket on his chest. What I'm sure about is that if you want to be successful, whatever you've done so far hasn't been enough, Xavier said. Starter Pokémon are given out for a reason. They're amenable to training with a fast rate of growth. Honestly, Yanma has only been with me for a few weeks now. If you've had a full month to train, this outcome was genuinely pathetic. Yet. Sam snapped. You realize that you tied with us, which means you've lost as well according to your own logic. That's different. I was merely testing. You were facing us in a fight, Sam said. Xavier scowled and turned around. I knew I shouldn't have got my hopes up, he said. Sam glared at his opponent as he walked away. Honestly, he didn't expect to meet someone almost as rude as Buck. Ugh. Not sure what his problem is, but at least everyone else seemed alright, just intimidated by us, Sam grumbled. Though, after Buck, maybe an ego is needed to become a Pokémon trainer. He chuckled at his own joke and stood up to leave the field to make room for the next person to use it. However, the second he turned around, he jumped when he realized there was a girl standing behind him, only inches away. "Battle me," she shouted with a wide grin on her face. Sam was frozen out of surprise, but he eventually managed to get out a reply. "All right." The girl pumped her fists and ran over to the field manager to slot in a new reservation. Sam just stared as he moved to the side. "At least I don't have to work to find another opponent." And this time around, he had a good feeling his opponent wouldn't turn out to be a jerk.